What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Bonfire Nexus. Episode 2 here, where we're going to be talking about some game franchises that should be revived. I just want to shout out everybody who watched the pilot episode. I felt like it was a pretty great debut, and very appreciative of that. And if you have any feedback, make sure to let us know in the comments or send us an email at the bonfirenexus@gmail.com. If you have anything that you want to let us know, you can use that email, or, better yet, send us what franchises you think need to be revived. Genuinely curious to see what you guys think in the comments, or whether that be through the email. But before we get to that topic, Daniel, what have you been playing or doing?
Honestly, I haven't been playing much. I've just been playing a bunch of Monster Hunter. But bar that, I've been playing a lot of TTS. If you don't know what that is, it's Tabletop Simulator, and it's basically it's more of a tool than it is a game.
Yep.
To be able to play other games, if that makes sense. It's like an emulator almost, but for physical games. And I've just been playing a lot of like Tabletop Warhammer lately, like a lot of Tabletop Warhammer. So just between that and Monster Hunter.
You got to show me how to get that set up, because I've really wanted to get into Warhammer proper. But unfortunately here I just don't have people to play with.
Yeah.
So
that's the magic of TTS. Like, I think playing Warhammer in person is always going to be the funnest way to play it, but it is like a very big investment, and unless you're like a huge loser like me, then I can see why you don't really want to get into it, and TTS is a perfect way of doing it. It's pretty easy. I can definitely show you or drop something on my channel or something.
yeah, I don't need to be taught how to play Warhammer itself. I know the basic rules. I've watched like
Basic.
Oh God, what's it called? I know, right? Different phases,
I've
different
tried playing
armies,
a couple times.
shoot, melee.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And then like there's objectives
I
too.
think it's
So
I think it's not as hard, or it's up to the level of Magic in terms of like overall complexity. Like Magic, I think, is a lot more simple at first, but Warhammer just has a bunch of these little rules that you always have to keep in mind. But I think it's a lot closer to Magic when you start getting into stuff like the stack, or the way that like the attack phase resolves and stuff like that.
Layering. There's a bunch of, I don't know if you've read
Oh,
about
I know about
too,
layers.
or,
Yeah.
like, the way, yeah.
Yeah.
How static effects work and all that shit. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I think,
crazy.
and just to put it out there, because I know like Warhammer and Magic are like the two biggest, I would say, tabletop games in the scene. And from jumping from Magic, I think we've been playing Magic for like plus 10 years, to Warhammer in the last 5. I still think Warhammer is like significantly cheaper than Magic. So it's really easy to say like Warhammer is extremely expensive, but when you kind of like look at the overall money that you spend over a course of time, like Magic will demand way more from you. So I think it's a lot easier, and it's a lot safer of an investment for the most part. Sometimes they're just like, hey, that army that you have, it's gone. You can't play it. Much like a standard deck, right? But the difference is that your standard deck also doesn't cost like $1,500, and then it took you 2 years to paint and build and shit like that. That's the difference.
It's kind of like a mixture of like Commander, right, and like I guess like other formats, in that like with building Commander deck in Magic, you pay a bunch of money, but it's legal forever, right?
Yeah.
Where, correct me if I'm wrong, Warhammer is kind of the same way, and even though they'll buff and nerf things, for the most part, you don't have to like update it to the extent of like something like Commander, because I feel like I have to revisit my decks at least like once or twice a year with all the new cards that are coming out with Magic, where it's just like, well, I mean, this is a slam dunk in this deck, or this is just way better than a card I currently have that does the same thing, So correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like Warhammer has less of that you don't have to update it as much.
Yeah, I mean, look, once you have it, right? Like that unit is going to continue to exist, even if they do take it out of like the competitive scene. It'll get Legends rules, which basically means like, hey, this is the last edition. We're going to support this unit in the game, and then we're just going to give it this set of rules that if you want to keep playing it outside of tournaments, you can. Just know that it'll never be updated again, right? So like they did something like that with Beastmen in the Age of Sigmar game, where kind of controversial. I'm a big Beastman fan, but they were basically like, hey, yeah, we're gonna delete this entire army. Basically, it still has Legends rules. So if you wanted to play it with your friends and you have like this Beastman army, then you're gonna have rules to play it with, but they're not gonna update it in like a year from now or like ever going forward. But you still had it at some point, and it was valid throughout that entire time. Now it's time to rotate, and I think that feels bad, especially if it's your only army, because now you're like, great, now I need to find a new army, and it's gonna take plus 2 years to fucking build, paint, and everything, right? But it's more of a time investment than it is a money investment. Magic is very easy to just like buy something and be like, boom, all right, let's play. Whereas Warhammer, everything feels a little bit more personal and it lasts forever. You know what I mean? For the most part.
Yeah, I get that. I've built up.
Yeah.
I haven't done the point calculations at all because I don't know how that's done. I imagine you use a codex, but where I have a pretty substantial like Custodes army. I have some of the basic infantry. I've got the dreadnoughts. I got a captain general, and some terminators as well as some backup units. So I'm confident like I could field a pretty sizable army, especially knowing that Custodes is like that point heavy
Oh yeah,
army that you can field. So
yeah.
I want to learn how to play it before I spend a bunch of time painting the rest of them because I've got about half of what I own like assembled and painted.
Yeah, it's kind of like Mike, you built a Necron Lord, or I think it was a Necron Lord, like what, 5 years ago? That's still a unit in the game. It's still something you can play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is it like as good as it was 5 years ago? Maybe, maybe not, but it's still there, and it'll continue to be there. I think that's like the nice part. And if not, then it's something you put on the shelf and display with your, whack, bad little Funko Pops. I'm a Funko Pop hater, so, but, so yeah, that's just
I
a lot
do
of what
want to
I'm
go
doing.
back and play Kill Team.
No, you don't.
At
You
some
goddamn liar.
I do.
Kill Team is fun until you
it
face
was
the Custodians and you're just like, wow, Warhammer's a terrible game.
I still had fun. I still had fun playing against Fedo and his Custodes. So, but
How does that? Because Kill Team is squad based, right?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
5 units
it's
of
a lot
Custodies,
smaller
but they're like a
scale.
lot harder to kill.
yeah, and I had like
Nuts.
10 units of Necrons, and we ended up in a tie, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like Fedo and I.
Yeah, like it ended up
Yeah.
being basically like what was it?
It got really dicey for me at the end. I
Yeah,
had to make some smart ass plays.
You took like 5 Necrons to take one guy down, and you were like over here bending time and reality and shit, and he's just like dying.
Yeah, it just did not. It did not fucking matter.
Yeah, you had to like outwit the
shields that
shit
he
out of
had
him.
on some of his. Yeah, and I think the captain he had was like in particular. There was something he was doing with like charging or something, right? That it was just like charges that would let him move and attack, and that was just
Yeah,
fucking.
I remember you
killer.
trying to put
Something
down
like
that like time mine or whatever that reduced his movement, and
Yeah.
even then he was like, nah, I don't care.
It just didn't matter, and I'm like, awesome.
Yeah.
Right. So that was a lot of fun, though. I did really enjoy playing that.
Kill Team
even though I
is
haven't played it in a long
ridiculously
time.
underrated. That game mode is fun as fuck because it is a cool way of blending like back and forth combat in a tabletop game where you wouldn't have it. Like imagine if chess
Yeah.
was like a 1v1 duel basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just like I move my unit here and then I point it there and then it dies. No, like Kill Team is very, very intuitive in how you fight because you have a chance of like, say a unit
Yeah.
hits you 5 times and then you both like, even if a unit attacks you, you get to attack back at the same time, and then you can have like say a pool of 5 versus a pool of 5 dice. You can like choose to cancel their dice out, kind of like if you've ever played like Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, sort of like that. Or you could choose to just take the hit and hit back instead. And like sometimes trading might be more important to like kill a unit but take damage as opposed to just block all the damage and hold it there depending on what you want to do, right? Like it is incredibly intuitive. So definitely a game that people should try out if they're in any way interested in getting into tabletop, and especially Warhammer, because Kill Team is super accessible since you could pick up like a squad of pisser units and you could probably make an actual Kill Team out of it. So like I didn't have Death Guard at all, and when I got into Kill Team I just bought a box of like standard Plague Marines and then boom, started playing Kill Team with Death Guard, and I was like, yeah, I like Death Guard, I'm gonna build an army out of them. Super accessible.
cool.
Yeah.
Every time I go into my local game store, at least the new one I've been going to, there's always like Warhammer players there, and I just look at it. I'm just like, damn, should I get into Warhammer?
It's so
But
much
then it's
fun,
just like,
man.
I have so much money in Magic, and it's like
I
I don't know
feel
if I can do both.
I always feel bad about spending money on Magic as opposed to Warhammer, but that's just me.
Really?
Yeah, because I don't really have like I feel like when I play Commander, I always have to be conscious about who I'm playing against.
Yeah.
And I don't have like the same, like the whole problem of like showing up to a table with a 7, so to speak, and then you don't know if you're playing above or below your power level. It's not it's just not the same. But with
That's what the new
Warhammer,
bracket system's for.
yeah, but with Warhammer, I feel like it's more approachable because like there is no like superpowering shit for the most part, Like if your army has something strong, then most people know about it. And it's not like you're gonna pull something out of your ass like, oh, I don't know, playing Emery from the Emery of the Lock or whatever, that mono blue commander.
Yeah.
You don't know whether I'm gonna win turn 2 or if this is just a normal artifact blue deck. You know what I mean? Like with Warhammer, it's like they're playing Space Marines. Okay, they might have Oath of Moments, but I don't, or double Oath of Moment, but I don't know.
I want to back up and just talk about the first time I kind of saw what's it called, Magic in action was when I was hanging out with you, Mike. I think it was the first time you'd introduced me to a bunch of your friends. Dan, you were maybe there.
Terrible first impression, I'll say.
Yeah. So you all just gone card shopping. I'd met you guys at your place, Mike, and you started opening up the packs and looking through the cards. And then you pulled like 3 of them, I want to say, if that, and threw away the rest. I'm like, holy shit, the card waste. And I get that's kind of the point, is to keep you buying, and a bunch of them are junk, or like you're not really supposed to use them once you actually get a viable deck. But man, I could never. I absolutely get that, Dan, where you spend all this money on these card packs, these boosters, which are like $60 for a good one. And then you're just throwing away half of them. I'd be like, yeah, that's pretty wasteful. Whereas with Warhammer, I haven't played my Custodies anywhere, but they're sitting nicely on my shelf, and I feel really proud about how I painted them.
Yeah, they're really cool to look at.
So I will say to that,
yeah,
if you're looking for things in particular, it is always recommended you buy singles, and not always that like cards that are highly sought after or the most powerful will be expensive. Like, yes, I'm not going to sit here and tell you Magic is not pricey, because it definitely is if you're trying to keep up with, I guess, good cards and stuff, and like trying to optimize your decks. But
even then, I can look at it, and I've been to our local game shop where they have them on display, and it's like, hey, $120 for this card. I'm like, I'm not paying $120 for a piece of cardboard.
I do appreciate that.
I mean, I definitely get that.
I do appreciate that about.
There's a collection aspect to that, right? Like, I mean, there's all these things that we could sit here and talk about. That's just, I mean, at the end of the day, like Warhammer pieces are molded plastic, right?
Yeah.
And there are times where, Daniel, you come in and you tell me, like, why the fuck is this like $60 for 3 of these, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like 3 models or some shit like that, which is like, it's kind of the same with Magic, but with Magic, I feel like it's more supply and demand rather than like Warhammer is more just MSRP from Games Workshop, right?
Yeah, that
sometimes just kind of fucks you over.
That's the biggest problem I've had with Magic, though, is that I remember I took a break for a while, and then like I came back to like Swan Song being like $20 and I was like, dude, this was a dollar staple. Like, what the hell happened? That's the one thing I do appreciate about Warhammer, as expensive as it is. Like, once I have my, I don't know, 5 Terminators or whatever, yeah, sure, it's $60. It's really steep for what is like just plastic. But at the same time, I have my Terminators, and they will continue to be Terminators, and it won't be like, oh, I don't know, I want another copy of this card, and it went up $50 over the last month, and now it's like, ugh, you know what I mean? And now,
so now my question is, with the format that we play, Dan, Commander, you can just build a deck once, and that's your deck, unless something gets specifically banned, right? You don't have to put any more money into it if you don't want to. And I've seen a bunch of budget builds that actually run pretty well. But I guess my point is, it's like the price point of building an army, correct me if I'm wrong, is very similar to the price point of building an optimized commander deck. Not a CDH level one, because CDH can get bonkers. But like an optimized commander deck.
More or less, depending on how far you want to go with it, yeah.
Yeah, because most of my decks like tend to be pretty well optimized, and like, for example, my dragon deck is the most blinged out one, and I have like a shit ton of fetches and like shocks in that, and that's like 1,000 I think it's like 1,300 like is the worth right now. And a lot of those dragons are kind of pricey. But I'm pretty sure that's like for, I mean, I've heard that, I guess, that price range kind of thrown out there before for certain like lists of armies and everything.
Yeah, it largely depends. The thing is, like, the problem I have with it is when I was like, for instance, my crew fix deck, when I went back to upgrade it, I haven't touched it since, like high school, college.
Yeah.
And then I went back and I'm just like, a lot of these cards are not good anymore. And
are just not worth it.
Yeah,
anymore,
and it's just like by a huge margin. Like I had a Swan Song in there that was $1 when I was playing, and then now it's like 20. So that's kind of cool, I guess. But at the same time, it's like my Deadeye Navigator package is fucking worthless. And now I have to go back and kind of reinvent the deck. Sure, I could play it as it is, but like we're no longer at the point where you can run like rewind. You know what I mean? Like you're having to run a counterspell that's probably a little bit better.
It depends.
It depends,
on the
sure.
deck,
But that's my
like,
point. It's just
Navigator's still like a very common like win con people play.
But that's my point. It's just like if you're say like for Alex, if your custodian, like your lowest terminators are not good this edition, you have them there, so if you want to play jank you can, and if you don't, you just slot them out, put something new in, and it didn't cost you anything. You know what I mean?
And I can still put my terminators on my shelf and say these guys look
and then like
cool.
Next edition they might be good, and if they're not, well, you still have fucking terminators. They're gonna be there,
yeah,
and at some point they're gonna be good. Like a lot of armies are like that. Necrons were doing so well, and then all of a sudden their codex comes out. Wraiths are like the big thing, right? So then everyone plays Wraiths, and then now it's like everyone's running Doomsday arcs. So now your Doomsday arc comes in, your Wraiths go out, right? And you didn't really spend anything because you've already had them there. That's my point. But it's not like you're going from like, I don't know, say like Swan Song got priced out, so now you're going an offer can't refuse, and then sink into Stupper, and then X, Y, and Z, and you're going, okay, here's like 10 here, and then 10 here again, and then 10 here again. Like, I'm not saying that you're meta chasing, you're not necessarily doing that, but you are going to continuously have to spend money, whereas like in the fringe occasion that your army gets completely thrown to legends, you don't have to spend any more money once you're there. You know, once you've reached the point that you're like, I have my army, I'm happy with it, I could play whatever I want. That's the thing I like about Warhammer.
I'd say there's some silver lining there, and I know a lot of people like to have a second army. Like
I
want to
have
do Dark Angels.
Oh,
like that,
trust me, let's
you
and me both.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
so yeah, you can pivot there. It gives you more of an excuse.
To that extent, I think there is some of that, and I guess I'm just defending Magic a lot. But there is some of that with Magic in like that formats. I mean, there's cards that like seem useless for like a long time, and then there's like a new deck or something that just all of a sudden is like, whoa, this card that was in my trash bin or in like just a throwaway shoebox now is actually good in this circumstance. And also, I will say to the point, I think we've reached a point now in the, I guess, design philosophy of Magic that cards that I've bought 2 to 3 years ago or even 5 years ago are not going as defunct or useless as when we first started playing Commander. Because there are decks that I haven't updated in a while, or maybe I put in 1 or 2 cards, but they still run well and still play very well compared to how it was previously. Because I do feel what you say with like Crew Fix, where it was like my Zet deck was that way, and I haven't played my Zet deck in like the last like 5 years because like all those cards are basically kind of, I don't want to say all, but a good chunk of those cards are just way too slow, or just not as good as what other, I guess, the other stuff I could be doing in those colors. But I do think now we're at a point, like I was mentioning previously, we're at a point now where I can comfortably have cards that I know will be good because they're not going to get cheaper. Because most of like interactions going to be 1 to 3 mana, right? Your board wipes are going to be 4 to 6. Your creatures, for the most part, the creatures aren't going to be like 8 to 10 mana anymore, and if they are, they try to make it worth it now. But like shit like Shroom and everything that were like dominating previously. Nowadays, unless you're doing Shroom combos in particular, or let's say Omnath, that the first like mono green Omnath 2 was also pretty bonkers back in the day, and that's like very tame compared to what we have now. But I do think we're at a point where it's just like upgrading consistently isn't really needed as much. And one other thing I wanted to say too, to the point of the pack throwing, there are formats, Alex, that make use of the whole pack, and it's not like it's just wasted cardboard. There are formats where you play cards that are only commons, or formats where you draft or play sealed with those packs and everything. Mm-hmm. So it's just that with the formats that I play, most of that tends to be kind of useless. But I have been looking into trying to get into Pauper because I think it looks really cool. But.
Okay. Yeah, it's just something I think that's going to be French to me going forward. I think I prefer the more like concrete formats of Warhammer and D&D, where definitely you can actually kind of create this visual for what's going on. And I'm not super into competitive tabletopping. I know you know, you still play them for fun at the end of the day. But with Warhammer, there is that aspect of painting and assembling.
It's ritualistic.
I think that is a fallback. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. That comes with it. That isn't necessarily, you know, part of. There are people who are just painters and will not touch the tabletop at all, and I think that's awesome. And at the same time, there are the people who will engage with both or with one or the other. But with Magic, I feel like you're collecting cards to make a great deck, and there's a lot of mechanics going on that you need to study. Partially.
If you like, because I personally like the collecting aspect of Magic. I know I don't want to say like it's not really a hot take, but people complain about prices. But then when you have a card that is like $40 to $60, it feels nice, even though you're not playing it. And I have a binder or two. Like my binder right now is, I think the last time I checked was worth like $3,000.
So I want to ask real quick about value, right? Let's talk about the macroeconomics of Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
Does the meta set the value?
Yes and no. There are cards that have good treatments that look really nice, that are maybe not as printed as much as like the regular card, that make it expensive, and they've recently done serialized cards to, you know, be the high end of that. But sometimes in the case of like certain cards, let's take the One Ring. It just got banned in Modern, which was like probably the main format that was being used. And it's the main format now is Commander, right?
Okay.
And that card is still $80 to $100, something like that, because it can just be slotted into any deck that you want to play it in. So meta will dictate price to some level, but then sometimes it kind of doesn't, because there are cards that are played everywhere that are still very cheap. And also vice versa. There are cards that aren't played everywhere but are expensive.
So that's and to add on to that question, right? So when you say they're banned, does that mean like official tournament rules, or are you allowed to stab your friend if they pull it out the game shop?
Yeah, the thing about Commander. The thing about Commander is that it's like Commander's a more casual format than every other format of Magic, and that's why people like it. It's a lot more social, right?
So when you say main, you mean Commander?
Sorry, say that again?
You said it was banned in main. That means it's banned in Commander?
No, in Modern.
Oh, no. I was saying it was
that's a different archetype of game.
Yeah, that's a different format.
Yeah, I think that's all French to me, as I said. But
no, you're good.
It's very like I think it is driven. I get your point, Mike, but like then you have instances like Dockside Distortion is getting banned, right? Which is like a Commander card, and like people lost a fuck ton of money on those bans. Which I would say is a card that dictated the meta. Like if you were playing red, you wanted Dockside. You could run without Dockside, sure, but like that card was heavily influenced because of the meta. And I mean, it's partially the design of red just not being that great either.
Yeah. Hashtag free Dockside.
free the little monkey. Well, the monkey's the second art. The goblin was the first.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not to say that Warhammer is like significantly cheaper either, because we're known for having something called Piles of Shame, where it's just like boxes that you've bought and haven't opened. I have a box that I bought. I have a box that I bought back in 2019, and I haven't even opened it. So I have a lot of money worth of
I've
like
got
Warhammer boxes
2.
just stacked in a shelf somewhere, and
I
it's just part of the
f-
deal.
funny enough, I have a bunch of boxes of that, but they're not Warhammer. They are Star Wars
Yeah.
Legion. I have like these in this really cool sets, and it's Mike knows his story. It's because I ran a Star Wars tabletop RPG,
It was so fun,
and I
man.
use them as
Yeah.
minis, and I'm like,
Start it up again.
yeah, let me get these to actually represent the villains you're gonna fight. And we
I
met
will
like 3
say-
times, and it's been about 4
Yeah,
years,
those 3
so-
times were probably some of the most fun I've had in playing a tabletop RPG. So
I'll say that like
Yeah.
definitely building models and stuff has opened up my interest into wanting to play more D&D, because like once we started doing like having maps and Roll20 and stuff, I feel like that was a lot more in down my line of interest, because the problem I always have with D&D is trying to like imagine things. I'm just like, I guess, not very of an
the theater
imaginative
of the mind
person.
aspect.
Yeah. So like I can imagine things going on, but I always like to have like a clear visual aid. And when I started looking, because when you started getting into D&D and stuff and looking at models, I started looking at D&D models as well, and I was like, man, I just want to like paint these things. They're just cool.
They're fucking cool, man.
Because there was that one like night bus that you sent me, and I immediately painted, and I was like, I just want to keep doing more of this. This is way better than painting like 2-inch tall men. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, D&D in person is way cooler than online,
Yeah.
especially when you have people who have 3D printers and you get to like print all the models and stuff.
yeah.
So-
I mean, I have a Saturn 4 Ultra now.
I've got a few D&D minis. I've got a dragon that was 3D printed for me, and the whole thing. The CFO of my company is super
Yeah.
into D&D and like mini painting,
That's
so
kinda awesome.
he gifted me a bunch for Christmas. Some were pre-painted,
Hell yeah.
really nicely done. Dan, I want to give you a website to look into called
Oh, I
Hero
know it.
Forge. If you haven't heard of it
Yeah.
already, yeah. So like you can get those unpainted. But what I've been doing is, because I play D&D primarily on a web format, like on Roll20. You can use the Hero Forges there. They have a mode for it, actually. There's
Yeah.
a photo booth to make top-down tokens for like your tabletop RPGs, right? That you do on web. So you can use them as like things. And I can
Pretty
maybe
sure
send you
we
one as
used
an
it, didn't we,
example
Mike?
here.
When we were doing your campaign?
Hero Forge?
No, but we were using maps on Roll20, right?
We were using D&D Beyond's maps.
D&D
like,
Beyond, okay.
alpha thing.
Yeah.
It was just easier to set up, and it worked pretty well for what we wanted because we didn't really use nitty gritty stuff. So, it does have less features than other virtual tabletops like Roll20 or Foundry, but for what we were trying to do, it fit pretty well. So,
And that reminds me, now that I think about it, Alex, there's something
yeah.
in Warhammer called Crusade Rules, which is basically like D&D, but with the fight system of Warhammer in it. So you're not doing like full scale fights like you would in a competitive scene, but it's kind of like you create a character and then they go through fights, but those fights are sequential. So like it's kind of like a D&D campaign. So if your character gets in a fight, they can get like battle scars that can give them upgrades or downgrades depending on if they get hurt too hard or something like that. So if you really wanted to, there's like systems that allow you to mix a D&D like aspect into the Warhammer universe, which I think is very cool. It's not my cup of tea, but you know, something that maybe you can look into.
Yeah, I remember the first time we all hung out, we played like Warhammer.
Yeah, but that's more
Deathwatch.
that's more
Tabletop
D&D
RPG.
than Warhammer. That's like that's
that was
yeah.
cool, though.
yeah, that's like
awesome.
Warhammer Warhammer.
It's a
coded
Warhammer
D&D.
tabletop RPG.
Yeah, but Crusade is like you play the game, but like say like XCOM or
It's
something.
like a campaign mode, right?
Yeah, it's like a
Or-
campaign
or
mode.
like-
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like XCOM, like you're going through a story.
Okay, I get you. No, that could be a lot of fun. I
Yeah,
get what you mean.
So
Okay,
that's something
yeah.
you can look into if you're interested.
All right.
Like that stuff usually
So,
isn't mine.
Dan, you'll have to show me. For sure, I'd like it. If you want to show me,
I've never done
really
it,
appreciate
so
it. Maybe we can
Yeah.
learn it together. With that, Mike, I want to ask you what you've been playing.
So this week I went on a work trip, so I haven't played too much this week. But before that, it was just Monster Hunter Wilds, pretty much all that.
Have you
And then I've
gone to-
recently, sorry, say it. Go ahead.
Did you finally get to Gore Magala?
No,
Bro.
It's been on and off. I was just like, getting ready for the work trip and stuff, and I bought some clothes and stuff that I wanted to wear and all that stuff. So I didn't get there. But besides Monster Hunter Wilds, I have recently. It's funny we mentioned Warhammer and talked a little bit about Magic because I have gotten back into standard for Magic. And it's been such
Really?
a long time since I played competitive Magic. And I watched the Pro Tour that happened a couple weeks ago, and that it looked, the format right now, the meta for standard looked so fucking cool. Where I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna re-download Arena and give it a try, and it's been a blast so far. Nothing egregious where it's just like this is clearly the best deck. Like there is like the top 3 or 4 decks. But if there's a top 3 to 4 that consistently like just go back and forth, I feel like that's a really great meta, and they're like pretty diverse. Like there's a really good control deck, there's a really good mid-range deck, there's a really good aggro deck, there's a really good combo deck, stuff like that, you know. So it's like it's very diverse. I've been having a lot of fun, so I've just gotten back to just playing some competitive Magic. Kind of brought me back to when I first started, and when I first started getting into competitive, I guess Magic with Standard, with cons and everything. And it's funny that I'm getting into back into Standard right before the next Tarkir set comes out, which I'm also really pumped for. But I've just been just diving into Magic and playing some of that Standard. And my brother Rami and I have been thinking about building Pauper decks in person to just do 1v1s and stuff. I feel like that'd be fun. So
I'm surprised that you're getting back into Standard, because I remember you saying that Aether Drift looked very uninteresting.
Oh, I mean, I don't think Aether Drift looks great, and part of the reason why the Standard meta right now is cool is because there's not a lot of Aether Drift cards that are being played.
Really? Even with the set just coming out?
Yeah, there's maybe a handful. It was just really funny because during the Pro Tour stream, you know how sometimes they have little segments in between matches and stuff?
Yeah.
One of the segments they had are like top 10 Aether Drift cards, that are looking good in this format, and the top 3 were like the only ones like in actively more than like one deck and not in the sideboard and stuff, like
yeah.
So the stuff that was actually like useful. But I don't know. I'm just not a fan of that set. But yeah, thankfully, me not being a fan of it hasn't had that much of an impact in Standard.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a while for that stuff to get into it, so maybe it will later. Maybe it was just for now, but Standard's been really great, and I've been really enjoying it, and I'm hoping it stays that way. With all the sets, and now Universes Beyond being Standard legal, I'm curious to see how that's gonna, affect everything. But it's been really cool. I've been playing a Jeskai Oculus deck, which is very feast or famine, but there's a card called it's like something Oculus. I forgot what it's called. But it's from Duskmourn. It's like a 3-mana 6/6. And just to give you a sense, Dan, it's normally you have to like exile 6 or 7 cards from your graveyard to play it.
Okay.
But the whole game plan is to have cards that are pretty cheap that draw you or discard stuff. So you play Fear of Missing Out because you discard a card and draw. You play other things like Inti. You play a couple looters and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. So the whole point is to have consistent draw, but then also throw those copies of the Oculus into your graveyard, and then you have a handful of cards. I think you play like six. There's 2 cards that one is 1 mana, one is 2 mana. That basically let you return a creature that's 3 mana or less from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Okay.
So it gets around that whole exile clause.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a 6 mana, it's a 3 mana 6/6 flyer, and you manifest, like you basically make a 2/2 creature on your opponent's upkeep, every upkeep.
I think I know what card you're talking about. Yeah, it sounds a lot like Tasigur Whip back in like the Theros or the Cons days.
Yeah, but way faster, because you can get that out on, like, there have been some games where I get that out on turn 2 and the opponent they're not playing black or white, so they don't have like straight removal for it.
Yeah.
So then it's just like the game's basically over, man, because I have 8 power. I have 8 power on your second turn,
Jeez.
So it's like, but the thing is, if they play cards that can handle your graveyard pretty well, if they play cards that handle your graveyard pretty well, the deck is like not as good. But I've been playing a version that's a little bit more, that can account for that, that's more grindy, that is slower in the beginning. It's not as fast, but it doesn't get as screwed over by, like, getting rid of those copies of Oculus and stuff. So, but it is still kind of a feast or famine type deck compared to everything else. So, but that's been a lot of fun. So, with that being said, Alex, what have you been playing, man?
I have booted up for the first time in a few years Battlefield 4.
Yep, been a lot of talk in our
Which one is
Discord about that,
4?
right?
Yeah. 4 is the one that
Thank
came
you.
out with 8. They were both modern. Yeah. In the sense that it was a
Oh,
sequel. They were both
this
modern
one.
shooters.
Okay.
Yeah. Battlefield 4, I think, took more of like a
It
global
was right
conflict,
before
but more so
Battlefield
focused around
1,
like
right?
Southeast Asia. It was. I'd say about 2-3 years
Okay.
difference, right? Battlefield 4 is, I think, everything that Battlefield should be. Not to get into a super big review, but even going back to it, there's still pretty active servers. You're, of course, not going to see as many as back in the day. My original, I got Battlefield 4 on launch. I'll say that. I played it back when it first came out on the Xbox 360. And man, these games are just
They're
so
really
good.
fun.
I've really been missing just that dynamic combat experience. I feel like the shooter genre has shifted more towards hardcore shooters in that regard.
A lot
right?
more.
So you could still get the combined arms thing, but you'd probably be looking at something like Arma or
Yeah, a
Hell
lot
Let
more like
Loose.
squad based, fast paced. It almost feels like
Yeah,
speed paintball, right? But with like guns, right?
yeah, where you're you get shot once and you die, which is fair, and it's also can be a bit like boring, I guess. Not boring. It's exciting moment to moment gameplay, but it's not what I'm
Yeah,
looking for. I'm looking for more of like you can call it
large
arcadey,
scale
but
arcadey, yes,
yeah,
grindy games, right?
yeah. So I've mostly been playing Conquest mode. I might boot up Rush or
Okay.
something, but Conquest is just the iconic Battlefield game mode.
I'm a Rush
Uh,
fan. I
and
like
again,
Rush
it's
more.
that yeah. I felt Rush was great in 3, and then in 4, the maps just weren't made for it, but they were
That's
definitely made
probably
for
why I like
Conquest. And
3
that's the
more than
thing.
4 personally.
Yeah, I haven't played 3 in ages, but that's because I think the servers died on
Because
Xbox
everybody just plays 4 now.
around the
Yeah.
time 4 came
Yeah.
out. Yeah. And then even I'm sure on PC you can find Battlefield 3 servers that are very active and fun. I think at this point I've probably put more hours into 4 than 3. Because the maps are just so good. The Levolution thing is a bit of a gimmick, but it's also a really
It is
cool
awesome.
gimmick that it's not always
Yeah.
good too. I think Siege of Shanghai, which is probably one of the best maps in the game, becomes worse after you trigger the Levolution and bring down the
Yeah,
skyscraper.
but seeing the skyscraper being brought
Uh,
down is pretty badass. Not gonna lie. For me,
It
it's
is.
never lost
It's
its
just-
luster. So
Yeah, right. I think it's still effective because you know you can trigger it as a player. It's not some event that happens at a certain point or you have to go out of your way to do. It's going to happen over the course of the match. And like it can change the game, genuinely. If you're having a hard time taking that tower and you think you're going to have a better time because you can take the flanks effectively or push with vehicles better, you should bring it down and then that should help your team win the match. Even if the overall dynamics of the map aren't as fun as they were. So I think my favorite map was like Flood Zone 2, where you could flood half the map
yeah,
and kind of take it up to the rooftops as opposed to like being on a street level battle. And then the DLCs are all great. I wasn't around when I think they were at their peak, but the remakes that they made for Battlefield 3, like Firestorm and Metro, are instant classics. Caspian Border
Yeah.
2, how could I forget that?
I love Caspian Border so much.
The progression system I love because you use a weapon, you get better weapons or upgrades for it. They do have the weird like battle pack system, which I always forget about when I play it, where you actually do need to. It's a mini loot box, pretty much. But yeah, it is what I think of when I say Battlefield. I know 1 is really good and beloved by a lot of people, and 5 was a little more of a mixed bag, but still like a lot of people liked it. Whereas 2042 was a mess and a half. So on the note of Battlefield 2, we have this Battlefield Labs thing coming out. Have you signed up for that?
I was going to, and then there was a ridiculous wait time. I think it was like 14 hours when I went to go sign up because there were so many people in queue. Which shows how interested people are in another installment of Battlefield, right?
Yep, and this looks to be like a modern shooter, right? They're going back to, again, days of Battlefield 3 and 4, not this near future, like...
bullshit.
Pseudo high-tech kind of thing that they wanted to do, where you can't really identify what's going on. So if you're like a military aficionado and like you prefer the modern military and how it presents itself, you're probably going to be satisfied with what's coming out. There's been some footage that's leaked.
Mm-hmm.
I've watched it. There's a big focus on destruction from what I can tell, which is another thing that
Cool.
think goes understated in the Battlefield games as to like how cool it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there's a guy hiding behind the wall, UFC 4, blow the wall up. Maybe it kills him, maybe not. But you've just opened a new avenue for your team to push through. So it's dynamic on so many levels. And just how good it looks, how good the squad combat feels in 4. You know, if you want to go a full squad of snipers, fuck you. Seriously. But you can do it. You can have fun.
Yeah.
And their kit is good, right?
Yeah,
but no one uses it because they're sniping.
Yeah, I to that aspect, I think that's one of the, I mean, besides of the performance and a lot of, I guess, a myriad of other issues. The main thing that I really did not like about 2042 is that it was more hero based. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? Versus class
the fucking operators.
Yes.
Yeah, ridiculous.
And it's just like it just kind of showed how out of touch EA was with that. Where it's just like they're chasing this trend. They even did what are those games called, like Fortnite? Shit, what are they called?
Battle Royale.
Battle Royale. They did a Battle Royale mode, didn't they?
They did an Extraction Royale mode.
Extraction Royale. Okay, but.
Yeah.
It for me, it still showed where it's just like Battlefield. I feel like it really isn't hard to get that formula of what makes a good Battlefield. At least the core formula, right? Of like, we just want large scale, class based combat, and I feel like they missed that in 2042 pretty big. Besides the large scale part. You know, and it's just like I didn't vibe with it as much as I did previous installments and everything.
It kind of
So.
seems that time, like with EA and those like big shooters, because that's the same time that Battlefield 3 came out, like Star Wars Battlefront 3 came out, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they kind of
Battlefront
2.
Right.
There was never a Battlefront 3.
Which one was the which one was the one that they released for like the PS4 that everyone didn't like?
Battlefront 1 and 2. They're called Battlefront 1 and 2, but they're like, I guess, revived versions, which I think they should have just done 3
I just
and 4.
assumed it was 3 because I know 2 was the one I played on the PSP.
It should have been 3 and 4. It should have been 3 and 4.
So, yeah, let me give you the Star Wars breakdown. So we have Battlefront 1, which came out around the time of Star Wars Episode 2, back in like 2004, I want to say, 2004, 2005. And then Episode 3 comes out and they release Battlefront 2, which is a beloved game to this day. And then I want to say in 2015, EA reboots it once they get the license for Star Wars. And they make Star Wars Battlefront, and then Battlefront 2 comes out about 3 or 4 years later.
Okay, so they just went back to doing 1 and 2 as like the kind of like the Devil May Cry thing, where there was like Devil May Cry 4 and they just went back to DMC.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So having played both, Battlefront 1, the reboot, is usually seen as like lacking in a lot of features because it's only one era of the whole Star Wars franchise, and you know, it got some good DLC support, but ultimately didn't deliver like the full sandbox experience that people expected from, you know, its progenitor series. And then Battlefront 2 is nowadays seen as a much better game because of the content they ended up adding. But at launch, it was really bad.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Like balancing issues. There was loot boxes that were really poorly implemented, even for like loot boxes. Insane microtransaction incentives. All that's pretty much gone now.
Right. I'm pointing out the fact that like it seems like EA, whenever they try to do these kind of like big, multi-people, huge fighting playgrounds, basically, that they tend to kind of drop the ball, even though they're kind of like the best at it. Because every once in a while they'll like just release something that's so ridiculously goated, but more often than not, it's paved in a path of just kind of failures.
I think up until the point of, because they had what was it, Battlefield Hardline?
Yeah,
like Battlefield was pretty.
Oh my God.
Battlefield was pretty consistent up until that point.
Fair,
right?
Yeah,
fair enough. I mean, but same with the Battlefront.
No,
so Battlefield Hardline, I
is,
feel like
past that,
could have succeeded.
Yeah, past that, that's when it started getting spotty. Because after Hardline, that was when Battlefield 1 came out, and that was fantastic. A lot of people loved that game. And then Battlefield 5, like you said, was mixed, right? So, like...
I still remember the the duels between trailers. Like Call of Duty, I think Infinite Warfare had come out.
Yeah.
They just released their trailer, and then Battlefield 1 released their trailer. And I think it was maybe the same day or within 48 hours of each other. And Battlefield 1's, everyone was gassing that shit up. It had the Seven Nation Army remix
so
playing over it. It was World War One, which we don't really see a lot in shooters of that variety. And then like compare that to Call of Duty, which had become this strange future shooter. I think it was still a mobility shooter back when those were a thing, where you had like exosuits and everything, and like Halo had tried to do it, and Call of Duty had maybe pioneered it. And there were other games, I'm sure, but that genre's kind of been forgotten at this point, I think.
I've got a question in general. Like, I guess besides maybe like Halo, and like, is there any other franchises that are like somewhat futuristic shooters that are like really big?
Apex.
Besides, like, I was thinking
Killzone was, I think, for a little bit.
God, I love Killzone. Actually, on the fucking day, that's a good point. Actually, on the subject of game franchises that need to be revived, I never thought of Killzone. But I mean, Apex is still kind of like a futuristic movement shooter in the battle royale.
Apex is a good one. Yeah, no, you're right. And there's probably some that people are yelling into the monitor right now. But yeah,
there was this one game I
feel
played.
Like most franchises that go into that like trend, or not because it's not really a trend, but go into that aspect. I just feel like they end up just alienating the fan base, and they just tend to be like looked down upon, like that type of thing. Which isn't always the case, because I think when Battlefield 2142 first came out, right? I think it was, that was like a lot of people really liked that game, but
yeah, that game's got a bit of a cult classic reputation. I think I don't think it ever got as big as
the other ones. But I know
titles.
People look fondly back on that.
Yeah, and I think that's what Battlefield needs to just go back to being what worked in 3 and 4. I think that was a peak. I know people love 2 as well. Again, I think it's just carrying on the legacy of like, these were modern shooters in a time when they were in high demand. They're not as in high demand now, but they probably can be. Like, it's been a long time since the Call of Duties. I think Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the reboots of those actually show that there is demand, but then they drop the ball with 3.
Yeah.
While there's still like a lot of
there's been a lot of like callbacks in gaming lately. Like, there's so many games that are going back to tradition. It feels like the reboots of like Call of Duty, and then you have like Fortnite going back to like season 1. You have Overwatch kind of reverting their changes back to like Overwatch 1, and then you have like games like Space Marine
sauce, dog.
Yeah, then you have games like Space Marine 2 where people are just like, yo, this feels like Gears. Like, this feels like we're back at that era of gaming, right? Where like the brown filter Xbox 360 days of like, it's just a game that feels like it belongs in that period of time. A lot of games have been kind of going back to that lately, I think.
Well, even beyond that too, with like indie games, like indie horror games in particular, just like going back to the PS1, PS2 era, like with style graphics and atmosphere. Like, I mean, we brought up Mouthwashing last episode, but that's one that's like popped off that shows that kind of trend. And I think, at least in the horror genre in particular, to your what you were saying, Dan, it's like really interesting, where it's just like we're trying to get like, not nostalgia baiting, because it's not nostalgia baiting, but
no, it's
trying to
like
recreate some of that magic in like the current day, you know.
There's this one demo for this game, I'm pretty sure it's still up on Steam. It's being kickstarted right now, but it's called Mindwave, and it's basically WarioWare but for your PC, and it integrates like PC stuff instead of like touchscreens. So there's like it's just like WarioWare. It's like mini games that get harder and harder over time, but the way that they executed the art style and everything feels so nostalgic to that kind of era of games. And it incorporates it well. It's not just trying to be a cheap ripoff, because there's like there's one mini game where it wants you to strum a guitar, and you have to hold 3 keys down, and those keys are very, very awkwardly placed. Like, it might be like Q, S, and W, and you have to hold those 3 down and then flick your mouse down to make it seem like you're playing a guitar. And I'm just like, that's really cool, because that's like how playing guitar feels sometimes. Like, you're just like smashing your fingers in a really awkward like way to try to get that chord down. And like all these little mini games that are just like they capture the magic of WarioWare, but they also capture a lot of realism of life. Like there's one where you're playing, you're like a little kid staring outside of a car, and you're supposed to be jumping over telephone poles, like a little stick figure that's sliding across the telephone
Yeah,
lines. And I'm like, I
that's
used
so
to do that when
funny.
I was a kid. Like there's a lot of games that are kind of like capturing, I think, the best elements of what we used to want in the past, because there's been a high demand of that as of late, I think.
Yeah, and those games worked. I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to capture that.
Mhm.
They were effective formulas, and ultimately, I think we want good products when we buy
Hmm.
games.
Yeah.
So if you have to look and say, well, this is why this game was fun, let's just do that, but make sure that we add new content, be it even the simplest stuff, new maps, new weapons, or new ways to interact with the sandbox, right?
Right.
Then that is perfectly fine for me. I'm willing to engage with, as long as you're not doing it every other year. I think that like Call of Duty has the reputation for doing. Then yeah, I'll buy your game, right?
Yeah.
Well,
If it's franchise, I'm interested in.
yeah, well, on the point of games that were awesome, I mean, our main topic here, game franchises that, we want to see revived. Going
Killzone.
back to that, Alex, you want to start us off with that?
Sure. I'm gonna switch up what I wrote down a little bit because something came to mind while we were chatting that I think is a poignant one. Um, I'm gonna start with XCOM.
Okay. When did XCOM 2 come
Okay,
out?
so XCOM 2 came out in like 2014.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
2015, I want to say.
Something like that.
2015, 2016. So it's been close to 10 years. They had a spin-off game that came out, I want to say, in like 2020,
Chimera Squad,
like
right?
Chimera Squad,
Yeah.
which I've played a little bit of it. It didn't land as much for me just
Mhm.
because like you couldn't customize the characters too much, and they're trying to do something with pre-made characters, which I think is fine. The game itself is pretty good. Um, and yeah, I know there's been similar games in the vein. There hasn't been too many. I know Gears of War tried to do one with Gears Tactics. Again, I played that. I thought it was cool. I think it was a lot more action focused than XCOM, which was a great innovation.
Mhm.
But back to XCOM, I feel like there's a potential to do an XCOM 3. I'm pretty sure they want to, but it's maybe just been a matter of like getting their ducks together, 2K and Firaxis,
Mhm.
right? Because I think they got a Marvel license and they did Midnight Suns. I didn't play that, but it was kind of like XCOM. It's a
Yeah.
turn-based um, game there. So no, I think there needs to be more games with real stakes that are produced by AAA studios. XCOM is a great example of that. The level of customization and the mod support was another big thing, which is why XCOM 2 is so great. XCOM has already been revived, which I think is a fun thing to talk about here. Is that it was a classic computer game back in like the 90s, right?
Mhm.
And had a wild franchise. If you actually look up the history, it's nuts.
Yeah.
They tried to bring it back with this like pseudo Mass Effect shooter
I was gonna
that wasn't
say,
very
yeah,
good.
originally it was
Yeah,
that, right?
there's the Bureau, right, which did have permadeath for your squad mates, but was very hard to actually like happen. It wasn't happening to them, and you played one main character.
Yeah.
And then Firaxis actually went, no, 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 let's do this right, and they released Enemy Unknown, and then this expansion, Enemy Within, and those were, I think, as perfect as like revives as you can maybe get.
Mhm.
I know there's some things which are missing, like the more dynamic like air management, um, but yeah, I've been thinking about XCOM a lot lately. I know there's a pretty big modding scene, and it's really funny the amount of mods you see on the workshop page where you're porting in these anime schoolgirls, but then also like Warhammer 40K Space Marines.
Yeah.
So you can just it is a cool sandbox for you to explore. I thought the setting of XCOM 2 was really cool, and the flip around of you're no longer defending the planet, you're trying to liberate it. Um, and I just I feel like it would scratch an itch for me. So I know you're a pretty big fan of XCOM, Mike, and Dan. I don't know your familiarity with it, but it sounds like you've played a little bit of it at
I've
least.
played
So
XCOM adjacent games. I've never actually played an
okay,
XCOM, but I mean the Mechanicus game is basically XCOM but with Warhammer skin on it, and
hmm
highlighting probably like the cooler factions of the game. Um, but I always
Yeah,
tended
really
to
our two
like
favorite ones, right?
yeah, I always tended to like those kind of games. And I've always looked around at XCOM, but I don't know. It just never. There was really nothing that wanted me to make me play it. You know what I mean?
I think there is a bit of a barrier for entry in that you have to really appreciate the systems at play, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I didn't even get that
it
deep.
is a
If you don't
yeah.
drive with the world too, I feel like
I
you're
just
not
saw
gonna
like
like it.
people with like
Mhm.
white skin suits fighting like stereotypical aliens, and I was like, "Is that it?" Like, I'm sure it's not, but it didn't have that thing where I saw it and I like, soy jacked at my screen for I don't whatever reason. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So
I
I don't
I
know. I
have a
just never went around to
very
it.
very fond memory of playing XCOM 2 and making characters for everybody in our Discord.
I do remember
And
that.
then yeah, it was just so funny trying not to get everybody killed, but when things happened, it was just it was great. But yeah, I never finished it. But I did play it a couple times. I liked it. I do have to try it with like mods, like you said, because even though I know it's supposed to give like pretty good stakes and try to, I guess, have a lot of consequence and everything and make you think about what you're doing. I wasn't a huge fan of the, what was it, the Avatar project, I think it was called.
That
That
yeah,
mechanic.
it
So
was pretty
but
highly criticized at the time. Yeah, don't let you take your time.
yeah, I know you recommended instead of like having a mod that just removes it, just having a mod that just makes it longer, right?
Yeah, and
So
there's one built in, I think, actually that
okay.
addresses that. There's
So
a oh God, I
I
forget the
think
name of it.
about
Second
XCOM
wave
2 a
feature.
lot, and like there's a couple times where I'm like, when I'm feeling like a more strategic type of game, XCOM 2
Yeah,
immediately is one that like comes back to my mind. It's like I could re-download this and could go for another run, you know. And it is a lot of fun. So
I just want to know why there's been so much silence around the franchise. Both games were very
yeah, I
successful.
was gonna
They
say,
both
and it
had very
sold pretty well,
successful
right?
expansions.
Like I know the
It did sell
reviews were
pretty. I
really
mean,
good, and like
yeah,
a lot of people like were talking and playing that game. So that is very interesting on why they never continued on that, you know?
critical acclaim, beloved by the people who played it. Even like looking past the minor flaws, it is a game that sticks with you. It's a game I think I will always go back to. Um, it's that dynamic storytelling which makes it so interesting. So uh, I don't know. I want to know what they could do to take it forward. I think it would be cool because we have that Chimera Squad, which did make it so that the aliens are playable, right?
Yeah.
Let's build on that concept, right? Let's make our own alien squad mates. There's already mods for that in 2 as well,
Hmm.
so I think there's a demand for that, and to kind of take it to a more, I don't know, even galactic level, right? Because I think the conflict on Earth, based on the story, is more or less resolved, and now you have all these alien species who the narrative is introduced as having integrated into the world. So you could even have something like Mass Effect vibe, which has all these eight species kind of working together but having their own dynamics, um, and take that to the XCOM world where you need to manage this teams, and they've built on concepts like soldier bonds, fatigue, and everything with the expansions, different factions of soldiers and varieties where they're not all just set in the different skill sets of their classes, but can be very flexible. Did you play War of the Chosen, Mike? Let
I
me
have
just ask that
not. I have
first.
not.
You've not. I recommend you do. It's got some really cool dynamic systems that, again, just improve the sandbox and give you more to do with the sandbox. Um, and then, of course, again, that organic storytelling. Your commando, your Rambo character kills 20 aliens in one turn, in one mission, and then it goes tits up the next mission, and you kind of have to make sacrifice plays or leave him behind, but then you can rescue. It's yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
There
That
is no
I
other
think
game
is missing
like
right now.
XCOM. Yeah, like you said,
Yeah,
Gears Tactics. I played it and I really enjoyed it. I thought the story was really cool. But it's like more of a linear type of game compared to something like XCOM where
yeah,
you're there's the mission to mission aspect of it, but then there's also the grand scale of like building up your base, researching things, and even making choices on which mission to do next, which like units to send. Whereas something like Gears Tactics, you're sending it's the same squad every time. Where
yeah.
even though mission to mission, it was very similar to XCOM in that aspect. Um, it still was missing that larger scope that something like XCOM gives you. That I think is really fucking cool. Also, the customization aspect of XCOM, to like what I said earlier, is fucking awesome. Personally, I did play XCOM 1 and I enjoyed it. I really love the direction they took with how the soldiers look in XCOM 2 over 1, cuz in 1 they were a lot more like bulky and everything, where 2 it felt like all the classes were a lot more distinct. And then I also liked that it was kind of half futuristic, but also you could tell like there was some inspiration in like modern military with how some of the things look, and I really liked that. So
and just a final note on the art design of XCOM, Dan, because I know you mentioned you kind of saw the classic looking aliens. You're like, this is kind of dumb. It is inspired by that 80s sci-fi like cheese a little bit, because the game franchise
that
does
is
come
like
from,
the point, you know.
Yeah. So there is a classic like gray alien and skin snatching alien, right? But they also, I think, make them more interesting in how they integrate them, because they might have like psychic powers that can influence your soldiers, and you still have to like, they're still a threat.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that the game looks silly. I'm just, I don't know. When I think like aliens, I think.
Thing.
Yeah, when I think aliens, I think of something more like, I don't know, the Terminids from Hell Divers or something, you know? Like space bugs, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, they do have space bugs.
Oh, well, then there you go.
And they're actually quite, like, one of the more serious threats because of what they can do to your soldiers. So
XCOM has always been a game that I like, because I played, like, it's not exactly 1-on-1, but Fire Emblem is a game I can think that's pretty close to it. Except, you know, this one's obviously with guns, and Mechanicus is like one of my favorite games of all time, so I'm sure I would enjoy it. I just have to get around to doing it, and it's not exactly up there in my priority list personally. Which, on another note, you should play
Did you see Space Marine? Did you see
Space Marine 3?
Got
I don't know how to feel about that. I'm gonna be completely honest.
Very soon, yeah. I think they're gonna reuse a lot of assets, which I don't personally think is an issue. But I just hope they add.
I don't know
maybe
why
they can focus more on like gameplay versus like remodeling things, right?
I just don't know why they have to make a third one. Like, I feel like a big DLC for something like how Monster Hunter does it with like Iceborne or Sunbreak would suffice.
Like a huge DLC.
Yeah, because I think from like the events of 2, it's like 80% guarantee that you're gonna fight Necrons. I just don't think that there's like another release needed for that. It's just like, just make a Necron DLC that's like huge. You know what I mean? Like,
honestly, I don't want to pay $80 or no, $60 for another Space Marine game so quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, I bought the first one for like 10. So
exactly.
And that poster looked a little like, I don't know, cheesy looking with Titus.
Just hastily thrown together.
Yeah, like I was like, that looks like something like that AI generated. Yeah.
Do you think that's pressures from Games Workshop to like capitalize?
I think it's pressure from Saber, because Saber and
they made so much money with Space Marines 2. They
were
like, all right, we need to make another one.
But like Saber is also a company that like kind of publishes like kind of shit games. You know what I mean? So I'm really hoping that it's not like a matter where they're just like, oh, big cash cow, keep going, and then they just, you know, release like a flop basically because they just wanted to capitalize on what you mentioned, like the pressure. I don't know. I'm not exactly optimistic. I know that people said that it's going to be in development for a while, but I don't really I just don't see the point.
I don't think
like Space Marine 2 looks amazing.
It should not have been announced this early, in my opinion. So.
Yeah. I don't know, because like the thing that got the Space Marine 2 hype going was that you had like a tangible trailer that made everything look so fucking cool, right? But with this one, it's just like, oh, Space Marine 3 is coming, and it's like, dude, it's been like 5 months since Space Marine 3 is coming, but it's only been like 5 months since Space Marine 2 came out. It hasn't really been that long. It came out in what, August? Okay, so it's like 7 months. But less than a year, and they're already announcing another game. Like, I don't know. That's a little worrying in my opinion. There's so much that 2 can work with as a foundation. Yeah.
I thought 2 was great. I don't think it has the steam to be this multi-number like
I don't
game.
think
And
so
I think
either.
we can look at Warhammer's history with like Dawn of War and see what happens when you try and do that too much.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
yeah.
Well, Dan, do you have a
Well,
game you wanna?
I wasn't gonna go in this order, but you did mention Dawn of War, and that is gonna be one of the games that I wish that they would bring back actually. So it's kind of a twofer. I'm gonna put Dawn of War and StarCraft on the same boat because they kind of are. But
Okay.
it's in like
Yeah.
it's in like the larger picture to say that like there isn't a semi-competitive RTS in the market right now. At least that like I'm kind of aware of. That is very like micro intensive. And I mean StarCraft was, as Nakey Jakey said, the government of Korea. Like that game was fucking huge.
Yeah.
Like there is no equal to like what StarCraft did for competitive esports, Like
Yeah.
you could draw lines to something like League and how League took over Korea shortly after, but short of like CS:GO and stuff like that, StarCraft was an amazing game, and so was Dawn of War. Not to the competitive level of StarCraft, but in the sense of like the thing about Dawn of War that made it so appealing was just like one, the amount of factions that you could play as, and two, like the systems and how the game played for its time with all the DLCs of like Soulstorm and Armageddon and X, Y, and Z. And then with StarCraft, the game was like only 3 factions, but they were so deep, right? Like the things that you could pull off in that game. Because I got into StarCraft kind of late. I got into StarCraft, I think around Legacy of the Void is when I actually started playing it. I've played StarCraft 1 when I was like at a neighbor's house and stuff, but when I started actually climbing the ladder, and I think I got to Plat in StarCraft 2, the more I learned about the game, the more I was just like, oh, there's like so much things that I don't know about, because every rank had something different. So to kind of draw a line with like a comparison to League, I feel like by the time you're gold, you kind of know how the game works, right? Like you know that you can't do this into this champion because you know what that champion does, right? Like if you cast a lot of spells against Kassadin, he's gonna eat you. Or if Ornn throws a Q down, he's probably gonna dash and then he's gonna knock you up, so watch out for the Q. But with StarCraft, like the higher I got, the more things I would learn about what a faction can do, and then that also opened up opportunities to what I could do. So like the Terran had a strategy. I think they were called Reavers. They're the guys that can jump over walls, and they had an ability where they could rush you, like similar to Zerg Rush. They would jump over walls and kill your resources, and then they would basically hamper your way to progress through the game. And then once I got to like Plat, then I found out that Protoss could do something very similar with something called, I think they're called Shadow Adepts or something. They were able to turn invisible and then pop up in your base and then kill your resource line. And then that's just like something you never really consider when you first start playing the game, because you're just like, I want big robot monster, bam, you right? So I just feel like that game continued to sink me in years after it was like largely deemed irrelevant. And when I went back and played this like modded version of Dawn of War, which is called like the Codex version, that game also had very similar systems to what StarCraft did, in the sense that like your units have equipment, or they have these little quirks that if you build around them or build, adjacent to them by challenging them with another strategy, then you can like try to take this angle on your opponent versus that. And the biggest part was, at the time I was addicted to League, but I was getting burned out because I was sick of like the 5v5 format. When you lose a game of like StarCraft or something, you only have yourself to blame, right? It's not like Valorant where like your teammates fuck up and then you have to clutch a 4v1 or something. Like I really like the idea that in a competitive RTS, it's like a 16th dimensional game of chess that you have to play, right? And a lot of it is only ever going to be your fault, right? You've either got like outskilled, which is your fault, or you just played it wrong, and that's like fine, right? Because there's certain units that are good into one faction that aren't into the other. Like I just really like that level of depth that game can have without getting bloated to something like League, where like you'll be playing competitive in like Plat or Diamond or something, and then like somebody just fucking off meta picks, I don't know, Gnar mid, and then you just get stomped, and you're like, what the fuck is this? Right? And it's just because like, or Renekton support, like it doesn't allow for that for the most part, which is what I really ended up liking about those competitive RTS games. In the case of StarCraft 2, there wasn't a sequel. In the case of Dawn of War, there was. It was Dawn of War 3. And unfortunately, that game was, I think, also published by Saber. I could be wrong. But
I can look it up. Hold on.
yeah. The problem with that being that like they kind of leaned into the esport thing way too hard. Like way too hard.
It was still Relic.
Oh, it was Relic, okay.
Yeah.
But they leaned into like the esport thing a little too hard, and then that was kind of the death knell for the game for the most part, because they made it very like hero focused, kind of like you mentioned for the Battlefield games. And the thing that made Dawn of War so appealing was like all the factions of Warhammer being represented, and then they only added 3. I will say, like, playing Dawn of War 3, I played it recently. It holds up really, like, not in terms of gameplay, but like when you summon an Imperial Knight or like an Eldar Knight, a Wraith Knight, it's really fucking cool.
Yeah.
Like really fucking cool. Like a lot of the things in Dawn of War 3 are really cool, really flashy, but like the gameplay and like the intricacies of it just got so stale. I don't even think you can base build in that game if I remember correctly. Whereas like something in Dawn of War 1 and 2 you could.
So I never played 3.
I'd like
Why
to
do you
see
like
it.
3 more than 2? Because I know 2 is, at least to my knowledge,
The Dawn
2
of
is-
War?
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
I don't like
Well,
3.
Why do you?
3's bad. 3's bad.
Okay. So you
I'm
like
saying
2?
that yeah, no, 2 is amazing.
Okay.
I don't like 3 because it's like I said, it's really flashy, it's really cool, but it really does just like turn into put unit here, make it fight this unit, and then kind of have
Yeah.
another unit up there doing its own thing. But there's never this time like I never have these moments where, say like in StarCraft, where I used to do a playstyle called Roach macros. So with Zerg, Roaches are basically like your typical infantry, right? Like they're not Zerglings, they don't die very quick, they're very good at range, but they're not like anything super special. But there was, Roach macro was basically, you can produce them a lot faster than your opponents can, and eventually you're going to send wave after wave after wave, and your opponent's not going to be able to handle them. Whereas with something like Zerglings, like the moment that they get like tier 2 infantry, they're probably just going to be able to deal with Zerglings no matter what. But what I did was I got like Burrow, and I spread my creep far enough into the field that I burrowed them all in, and then I sent a bunch of like Zerglings from the back, and then I kind of like led them into the creep and then unburrowed all of them, and they didn't see them, and then just like this giant firing line of roaches came and just destroyed their entire marine death ball. And like things like that where I just like try to take a new strategy whenever I can. I didn't feel like that was the case with like Dawn of War 3. It was very much like my unit is bigger with stats, therefore you're dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas like Marine Bio Ball will destroy anything that is like infantry, but the fact that I was able to like lead them into the roaches to like be able to fight and tie them up, because Marines like Marine Bio Ball will just destroy everything because they have so much range. But once those roaches pop out of the ground and he's way too busy paying attention to those Zerglings in the back, that was enough for my roaches to get in and just annihilate them. And things like that, like these little things that you can kind of pull off, or like if you pull off like I think it's called like a Nidus tunnel or something. Like if you manage to pull that off and just send a bunch of Zerglings into their back line, like those little quirks that you can do within the game are a lot of fun. As much as I don't like it, like Terran Turtle is a really cool strategy, which is where you just build a bunch of siege tanks and then turtle your way until you get giant robots and then win the game that way. There's a bunch of strategies that the game has, and Dawn of War 3 didn't have that. It was just like, I have my hero, therefore I win. I think like, wasn't the Battlefront games kind of like that? Like if a Jedi came in or a Sith Lord, you just kind of started getting stomped.
So they were made
basically
as
killing
stomp
them.
units in the originals, right? Like
Mhm.
in the first one, they were unplayable. They were basically like unkillable teammates
Mhm.
that worked somewhat effectively. In the second game, they were playable. They had different variety. They were rewards for high achieving players, right?
Right.
But they could be fairly like fragile, and they had a time limit to them.
Yeah, I do remember that, yeah.
I
Yeah,
remember
whereas
like having like one of those explosive packs, and you just put it on there, and you could on some maps
Yeah.
like Camino, you can just blast them off the map. So
You can also just run them over with a vehicle too. So you
Yeah,
have courtesy and other
yeah.
aspects.
Yeah, I do
Whereas
remember.
in the reboots, they are much more lethal. And if one person is good with them, they will be able to play them the entire match, and it's just not a fun thing to deal with most of the time.
Yeah.
It's great
Yeah.
when you get to play them, but especially in the high, like my experience with that, and not to get too off point here, is the game was better when there were either a smaller amount of heroes or no heroes, because that infantry combat was just so fun compared to
Yeah.
having just this wrecking ball, which you couldn't really do anything about
Yeah.
because
I feel that.
single soldiers didn't have enough damage output to kill him.
Yeah, like that's what I mentioned in the last episode. That's the thing that I like the most about Star Wars, and that's kind of how StarCraft wasn't as much as a victim as Dawn of War 3, because Dawn of War 3 kind of had like chapter masters and the heroes and stuff.
Like actual named heroes.
Yeah,
and stuff?
like the
Wow.
chapter master of the Blood Ravens, Gabriel Evangelos or whatever.
Yeah.
Like he like if you played him right, he just started stomping everything, and it's like it's
That
cool.
wasn't the case in number 2, right?
No, it's
Okay.
cool, but like at the same time, I feel like Dawn of War was selling itself as like a giant war game, right? That especially Dawn of War 1, like you could have so many units in the field at one point,
Yep.
and it was just chaos, right? Dawn of War 2 kind of like whittled it down into like a more strategic StarCraft style, which is my personal favorite. And then Dawn of War 3 kind of tried to do that, but more like MOBA elements, because there was like designated lanes in a way. Like there was like not, it wasn't so scattered, you know? It was more here's top lane, here's mid lane, here's bot lane, and then you kind of just send guys out there to do things, and maybe you just move in between like you do the jungle. A lot of people drew lines to like competitive MOBA to be the thing that kind of killed it, as well as like, you know, being able to summon heroes and stuff that just kind of was like it's cool, right? Like it's Warhammer has like named heroes and they are cool, but I just don't think they belong in a game that, especially if you saw the Dawn of War 3 trailer, which is like one of the coolest trailers I've ever seen. It sold itself as like a very this is a giant war, there's a bunch of bodies everywhere, and then you like only have like maybe 10 bodies in the field at a time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just felt empty, except when you summoned a Titan. Then it was cool, right? Because you hear this guy just like talk about righteousness as he's like shooting rail guns and stuff. But yeah, I think while I would like to see those two franchises, I think what I'm trying to get to with my whole point of like a game that series that should come back is just like I would love it to be those two. But if it's like Supreme Commander coming back or something, I don't give a shit. Like, I would like just to see a competitive RTS come back to the market. I think that there's nothing that's really taking that space, and it kind of feels like the perfect time to do so, honestly.
Yeah. I want to ask real quick on that note of like competitive RTSs. Have either of you guys played the Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth games?
No.
Yes.
1 or 2? Oh,
I have. I played 2.
2 is so good, but it's like almost impossible to play now. Because you can't get it on Steam or any like other market. You have to.
I have it
emulate
on
basically.
Xbox 360.
Yeah, me too. So just it was very much like Dawn of War 1 in that you free build your base, and you can get
That game was awesome.
huge armies,
Mhm.
and they're iconic things of the franchise, right? But I get what you mean.
The Star Wars RTS a lot of people like too, right?
Empire at War, I love Empire at War.
That's one I need to try.
Yeah. I would recommend a mod. The base game is old, right?
Yeah.
There's one I play on that one called Awakening of the Rebellion, and they've just released a Clone Wars version of it, which I cannot recommend enough. I think it modernizes that game almost perfectly.
So basically what I'm hearing is RTSs need to make a comeback in general.
I mean, yes, but if you want to play like a really good version of Dawn of War 2, there's a Codex mod out there that adds a bunch of faction. It adds the Mechanicus. I'm a very, very big fan of that.
Is that the Apocalypse mod?
No. Apocalypse is Dawn of War 1. The Codex mod is Dawn of War 2.
That's the one that just lets you just bring in crazy bullshit.
Oh,
yeah. But like Dawn of War 1 is a little too dated in my opinion. Like that game just looks a little too
I've only
bad.
played it a couple times, but it was pretty fucking cool when I did.
Yeah, Dawn of War 2 is the more like streamlined version. It still holds up kind of well. Like it just looks like a kind of like dated game, but the Codex mod adds a lot of customization, and it adds like 3 new factions to the game, which is pretty sick. So if you out there are interested in trying out Dawn of War, definitely do it with mods. I'm pretty sure both of them are free, and the games cost like $2 now. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, I'd like to see
they are on
an
sale
RTS
right now.
come back.
Actually, on that note, very cheap. So I do love Dawn of War too, Dan. Or the franchise. I didn't play too much of two. My I think interest goes more towards the original.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
just again, that the scale of it is so much fun.
Yeah, I think it's time for
Uh,
the genre to come back.
it is, yeah.
All right. Well, speaking about a game in a dead genre, the first game I want to talk about is Rock Band. Actually.
Oh,
What the fuck? Whoa!
Yeah, yeah.
DJ Hero, they should bring that back.
That's a good one too, actually.
Yeah.
So the last time a Rock Band came out was October 2015, Rock
Oh,
Band
fuck.
4.
Christ.
So I know there's stuff like Fortnite Fest, and I have tried it, and it's cool for what it is, but it doesn't have the same feel. Most of the songs are a lot easier than something that Rock Band gives you. And I think they've recently added support for like peripherals.
Mhm.
But when I played it, they didn't. And having the peripherals is like part of the fun. I mean, it's the main part of the fun. Uh, and I guess people who are listening to this, they might ask why Rock Band over something like Guitar Hero. I feel like once Rock Band came out, that's when Guitar Hero started to take a dip a little bit. Um, so what Guitar Hero 3 had came out, and then Rock Band 1 had came out, and then Guitar Hero Metallica and Van Halen came out, which were good games. But then Guitar Hero tried to emulate what Rock Band was doing, because Guitar Hero was only guitar and bass. And then I think World Tour was their first try at the full band thing, and I personally wasn't a big fan of that. I find their peripherals a little bit more clunkier than the Rock Band ones. And I, in general, just like the feel and vibe of Rock Band more than Guitar Hero. But man, there is just something so cool about picking up one of those instruments and just jamming out. I mean, Rock Band legitimately is the reason I play guitar and I listen to metal and rock. Um, I've sunk I don't know how many hours playing Rock Band 2 when it first came out. Like that speaking of a game that or games that you've put a crap ton of time into it, Rock Band 2 probably has to be in my top 10, maybe top 5 in games I've played like the most.
Mhm.
It I just have so many fond memories of just there playing and just discovering new music. And yeah, like I said, it gave me that inspiration of like, what if I just do this in real life? Right? Like, what if I do just go ahead and try to learn this song in real life? And thankfully, there was a class I could take in school and I learned how to play guitar. But that Rock Band and to an extent Guitar Hero will forever be that inspiration for me, and I always credit them with getting me into metal, rock, and playing guitar and everything. So there's a lot of sentimental value in it, and the social aspect too, I think is like pretty understated with something like that.
Mhm.
Bringing in a bunch of friends or in my case family, together to like just have fun. It almost feels like a karaoke night, but with more than just karaoke. So there could be multiple people, playing at the same time. Yeah, like whenever my older sister, and she comes down to Florida to visit us, like one of the things that we always 100% of the time do is play Rock Band. And every single time it's almost like a must, like a not a ritualist, like a tradition for us, right?
Right.
And it's just really good at bringing people together, having fun, sharing music that you like, or even discovering music that you didn't know you liked and everything. And there's just not anything like it. I know Clone Hero also exists. I have Clone Hero. I love Clone Hero, don't get me wrong. And it does give me my fix for the most part, but there's something to be said about the simplicity of just having the Rock Band set up, whether it be in your room or your living room, and just being able to hook it up, invite some friends over, and getting to play that. And in the aspect of Clone Hero does have a lot more songs generally available, but that not all of them are charted with all of the instruments. So there were a couple times where, because I think it wasn't until like a year or two ago, that drums were not supported. It was only guitar. So maybe I have to check back in on that. But to my knowledge, like the songs that you could find, most of them did not have like any drum charts to them. And drums are one of my favorite instruments to play on Rock Band / Guitar Hero / Clone Hero. And no vocals in Clone Hero. So
Rip.
I just feel like there's a lot of space still to be explored. There's so much great music that's not been on Rock Band or Guitar Hero or one or the other. And it's a little tough, right? Because you're asking people to buy in more. And in this day and age where online multiplayer is a lot more prevalent than something like couch co-op or whatever, I don't know if it'll ever come back or if it's like something that, I don't know, maybe shareholders or stakeholders are scared of like bringing back. But it's one I hope and wish at some point come back.
I think I might know on that note, it might just be the licensing costs are just so crazy for a lot of this music.
Oh,
yeah,
man,
I could see that.
Yeah.
I could definitely see that. But
like Spotify album sales and everything, I think are so important for a lot of music groups.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, just having that, I guess you can watch everything on YouTube. It's not really that big a deal. But even then, I think someone's pulling some revenue from it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, even getting like an Elvis song, just to get a really fringe example, is a couple billion. So you have these very prestige artists. Even if you go as they get more classic, I think they probably get more expensive too. So I don't know.
Definitely feel that. I could see
there's
that.
a huge production cost, I think, that comes with making a game like that.
Yeah,
Unless you're
I think
doing
I remember
songs. You're gonna.
I remember
trouble.
reading too, also that like I think they were always at a loss with like selling peripherals and stuff.
Oh yeah, that too. You got to make those parts, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think
But,
Rock Band.
I mean, there's. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think Rock Band didn't survive because they didn't have Hatsune Miku in it.
This
To be
guy.
honest.
Unironically, I think those types of games are a little more popular in Asian markets to this day, but they are.
Mhm.
I don't think they come with the peripherals usually, and they're more of the rhythm game variety.
Oh god,
So-
I fucking love rhythm
They're
games.
a lot
dude.
more arcadey.
I love rhythm games, but the moment you give me a peripheral, I become like a fucking chimp without opposable thumbs. It is so bad. I've never been good at Rock Band or Guitar Hero. I was really good at DJ Hero, but like for me, it's like those Asian rhythm games that are right up my alley. Like I'll play Osu for days, but the moment you give me a Rock Band guitar, I can't do anything.
Yeah.
I
like the
don't know,
novelty
for
of
me,
the peripherals.
I just gravitated towards it, and I the first one I ever played was Guitar Hero 3, and that supported no, it was actually it was Guitar Hero 3. And that supported like you being able to play with your like Xbox controller instead of having like the guitar.
Yeah.
So I initially played through it, most of those games. Well, the demos of those games, because I didn't have the actual copies when I was younger, with an Xbox 360 controller.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until like Rock Band 2 came out that I begged my parents for my birthday to get the whole set and everything, and I've just never looked back. I have 5 copies of Rock Band 2 that like every time I go to a thrift store and I see Rock Band 2 in particular, because that's my favorite one. I always like if it's under like $10, I will buy it just to have extra copies just in case, because that's how much we like in my house we play Rock Band 2, where the disc like starts to get fucked up and everything. So I have backups, so we never run out of fucking Rock Band 2 to play. Like I'm so
Stashing away
serious,
Rock
man.
Band 2
Yeah, exactly.
copies.
I'm ready for the Rock Band apocalypse. So.
They should bring
yeah,
back...
that's a franchise that's like so like a near and dear. I mean, and even to an extent, like DJ Hero, even though that's something I didn't get into, like from the outside looking in, is like really fucking cool, you know. And it's just like,
bang.
I just wish that the music, I guess the peripheral focused music genre didn't die out, but
Yeah.
I mean, maybe just there wasn't enough interest in that, and then also the cost of having to rebuy peripherals on like newer consoles. I know that was a major reason why Rock Band 4 failed, is that they didn't come out with any sort of way for you to use your old peripherals, which like for a lot of people, me included, was kind of like a deal breaker. It's like, I already have all this shit. I don't want to rebuy another bundle,
Yeah.
to play Rock Band 4. So
They should bring back DDR.
Oh yes,
That's my peripheral game right there, dude.
Yeah,
there's
that's
this
a good
one
one.
there's this one game you saw me play when we went to Japan.
Yeah.
Shit.
It
God.
was like DDR, but wasn't exactly DDR.
Yeah,
right?
God, what is it called? Dance fuck. I played it so much, but I'm blanking on the name right now. It's basically
Dance Fuck. Huge fan.
Yeah, Dance Fuck. Yeah. It's basically like a giant light up pad that tracks your movement, so like you can step anywhere on the mat as long as you're pressing the buttons that they're asking you, and it's a lot more dance oriented because it's not like left, right, up, down, but it's just like this side of the mat or that side of the mat, right?
Yeah.
And it has a lot of like slides and stuff too. Like there's a really cool ones where it'll ask you to like put your right foot in the middle, and then it'll do like left, right, left, but you have to keep that one foot in the middle. And you could do like, say, left foot middle and then reach your right foot to the right, and then left and then reach to the right. Or you could like spin around, like actually spin, because you can hit like the left and then the right with the one foot while keeping the middle one anchored. And yeah, I just thought that was cool because it intuits you to actually dance as opposed to like hold a bar and pray for God that your legs don't snap.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, I mean, I tried getting into Guitar Hero and not so much Rock Band because Rock Band wasn't like in arcades or anything. But Guitar Hero definitely was. And I tried getting into it there because I was an arcade kid. I fucking love arcades. But that's one of the reasons that I liked Guitar Hero was because the peripherals were just already kind of included. Whereas like Rock Band, it was asking a lot. So I can only imagine what it was like for them to ask you to buy another set once you've already owned one for these many years.
Yeah, I mean, I will say to an extent, I think the quality and atmosphere, and I guess maybe even song selection of Rock Band was better, and that's why I kind of survived longer than Guitar Hero, because Guitar Hero just started going in these like weird directions. There was like one where it was like monster based and shit, and I was like, what are we doing here, right?
I saw this,
but
I saw this video, it's this TikTok like 2 days ago, where it was a bunch of guys playing Rock Band in their garage. And it was like dark outside, so there's just like this like one garage light that's on, and they're playing on like a CRT TV that's like held up by milk crates, and it's like fucking tiny. And then like this guy's recording as these guys are playing, and this pizza guy comes up and drops off the pizza, and he like the guy's like singing like Evanescence while he's like pointing at the guy to just leave it there, and then he's like telling him to go grab a slice, and then the pizza guy just starts recording them playing. And I was like, that is such a vibe, dude. It's just like a bunch of like fucking 22-year-old guys in their garage playing on this like shitty TV, playing Rock Band in like 2025. And I know, like, I saw the comments, and a lot of people were like, you don't understand how important this is. Like, that is the thing that what made Rock Band so cool, is that you can just have a bunch of guys, doesn't matter if you're playing on shit equipment in the middle of a cold night or something. It's like it's more of an experience with like playing with four of your friends than it is like, just hitting a bunch of buttons on a plastic guitar.
All right, well, Alex, what do you want to bring up next?
We'll talk about so this genre is, I think, alive, and there's a few games that are pretty good, but I just don't think any of them had really hit what made the genre so good, and that is Left 4 Dead.
Ooh, that's
yeah,
a very good one.
It is a very good one, and I know that the zombie genre. So when I say the genre, I don't mean the zombie game genre, because we're always gonna have zombie games, right? I'm talking about the 4-player cooperative shooter kind of genre, with like the versus mode on the other side of that, if the game includes it, which is a coin flip at this point. So I can name a few examples of games that are good in this genre. Deep Rock Galactic, I know a lot of people love to death. The Warhammer Tide games, Dark Tide, Vermintide, right? Very good following, and then I think Vermintide just added versus mode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Dan's a huge Vermintide and
Yeah, so
I played a lot of Dark Tide too,
Darktide
but I
fan
feel
art.
like that
Yeah.
game it's a little too far off the Left 4 Dead formula.
yeah, so I think the Left 4 Dead formula is great because of how simple it is, and
Right.
Mm-hmm.
that you start every campaign the same, pretty much. There's not like a meta aspect where you're building a loadout or anything. Because I don't really want to do that. I don't want to look at like metas and number values and the Dark Tide way of doing it, where you have to like break down weapons or just waste a bunch of loot or buy new stuff.
Yeah, it's real bad.
Nah, yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like Vermintide Darktide's like more of a half like in between of Left 4 Dead and like Borderlands, right?
yeah, like a
Yeah.
looter a weird looter shooter, but not even. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
Vermintide is more traditional. It has like 5 skills that you level basically, and then like your weapon
Mm-hmm.
stats are like important, but it really just matters. It's like, is it good at killing these guys or those guys, right? Because like in Left 4 Dead, everything dies the same way, but in Vermintide, it's like if something is armored, you maybe want a different weapon. Darktide is completely different story. Darktide is like an entire skill tree of like 30 something skills, and like all your
yeah,
weapons behave way too differently. Darktide goes way too far in the other direction, which is why I don't think it lines up with something like Vermintide or like Left 4 Dead, where it's more like slow paced trudge, but like consistent conflict. Darktide is just kind of a mess, in my opinion. Vermintide
hmm
is a more true comparison.
yeah. Well, I gotta disagree that I think Left 4 Dead is slow paced. I don't think it is. I think it's actually pretty quick paced because everything does die to bullets, right?
Yeah,
My
I
love for
mentioned
Left 4 Dead.
I mentioned the like progression. You know what I mean? Like
Oh yeah, there
Darktide,
is.
you're like running through everything because like your guys can just blast through it. You know what I mean? But like in Left 4
Yeah,
Dead, it's like if there's a wave, you have to keep going, but you if there's like a wall coming towards you from the direction you have to go, you have to kind of like pull back and fight around and then keep going. You know what I mean? Vermintide is
yeah,
kind of like that. Like if there's a wave or something coming through, you have to kind of pull back. You can't just rush through.
hmm
Because in those games, they'll the elites like they aren't
yeah.
as
They hit hard.
well, they hit hard, but they aren't as hard to kill either. Um, but they do come a lot more often. Whereas in Darktide, it's like if all your skills are up and there's like 5 giant ogrins, you just fucking annihilate them. Like you're just like, yeah, whatever, keep going. And you have
Yeah,
like you can sprint in that game too, so you could just like slide past them and not even give a shit.
yeah,
Whereas in like Left 4 Dead, it's like you're consistently in conflict. It's fast paced in that sense, but like while you're moving through, it's not like it's not like a movement shooter.
yeah. So I just miss the cooperative um, focus of Left 4 Dead, in that everyone comes from an equal position, so you need to cover each other equally.
Mhm.
The AI director and every like moving piece of that game works so well. Those games, I think the way the zombies respond and react, atmosphere is like Valve's forte,
Mhm.
and like Valve games in general, I think need to have a resurgence. I get it. Valve doesn't make games anymore; they make money, but I I love those franchises. I know TF2 players are screaming for a new game, please. Half-Life Alex came out and teased that we might actually be getting Half-Life 3 for real, and it's been like 5 years now, and there's still no news. But Left 4 Dead is something that had a big impact. It had a spiritual successor in Back 4 Blood, but my god, that game is bad.
That game is not fun. No.
No. So I know it's the same studio that made it, but just I think it was there's a I forget the name, it's a Crowscabat or something. He has a little mini doc where he points out that Left 4 Dead was Valve's product and not like Turtle Rocks or whatever. The studio was called when it made Left 4 Dead. But also the versus mode is just so much fun.
I haven't tried it.
Yeah, so it's not something I'd ever go into a public multiplayer lobby for anymore because of how angry people get just in Valve games. Um, there's no ranking system. There really is nothing except a "you win" message at the end of each round. But my God, people will fight over that and get really mad if they don't get that "you win" message.
Yeah.
So it's just entertaining to me how upset people get over that game.
The versus
So
mode is really
it's
fun.
yeah, it is also a game of real consequence, right? Especially in the versus mode. If you make a mistake and the enemy infected team takes advantage of it, you're down a survivor the rest of the round. If you lose someone at the beginning, that's gonna fuck up the rest of the round for the players. So they have to play. They have to either step up their game to make up for that, or they're gonna lose. So it's also like a game where if you're playing on higher difficulties, and again the versus mode, you can really scrape out some like last minute on the back foot wins. That feels true to like the zombie genre, where it really is just like last man standing. And that's a game where if you are the last man standing, I'd call it 90% chance you're not going to make it. Just on the virtue of like the special infected will trap you, and you can't break it on your own. It is a game where you need teamwork. The first message the game usually tells you when you exit the safe area at the start of each campaign is stay together to survive. So
yeah.
Along with that, the characters are charming.
Coach.
There's Coach. My friends call me Coach.
I'm an Ellis guy. I love Ellis.
Ellis is great. I like Nick. He's a real scumbag, but he kind of has like a heart of gold deal if you pay attention to the dialogue. And that's the thing where like you can pay attention to the story being told. It's incredibly tight, and you really have to kind of look for what connects each campaign, especially in the first game. But man, that world is so interesting. The nature of the infection is like very grim dark, and hopeless because it's like this super flu that is constantly changing and evolving. And the gameplay systems work great. Now, the only thing I think people typically criticize is the turnaround time for Left 4 Dead 2 was like a year.
Yeah.
It's because I think they did when they made Left 4 Dead 2, they made the new campaigns using the like source engine assets, right? And of course they made their own new ones. But they pretty much just took the base Left 4 Dead and then built on some of the systems, fixed around the UI, and made it a little better. So it's fun. I think the campaigns have really interesting settings. They're iconic. The crescendo events are things that, again, unforgettable moments and unforgettable places. If you are a person who has played those games a lot, you will remember the map layouts and the way the AI director works to reward you and punish you is something I don't think we've seen in a lot of other games, even the ones that are in that same genre. Yeah, Left 4 Dead, I'd like to see a Left 4 Dead 3. I know it's not likely that we will ever see a game again bearing the title Left 4 Dead, but that's true to the actual franchise. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a good time to do it because online play is more popular now than ever. We again, going back to what worked, get rid of the meta game features, the hub areas. We don't need that. I think we just need to throw our friends into a lobby, hit play, and then have a good time.
Yeah.
And that's what Left 4 Dead promised you.
Yeah. I think like Left 4 Dead is kind of still, I don't know, I guess in the limelight through Helldivers 2. Not in like the exact same way, but I feel like Left 4 Dead 2 is giving me I feel like Helldivers 2 is giving me that itch of I want cooperative play, because that game like really needs you to be cooperative to survive. You could go out and like solo stuff, but for the most part, like if you are caught in the middle of a wave, like you need to be together or else you're gonna die. Which kind of reminds me of Left 4 Dead in a lot of ways. But in the sense of like a traditional, point A to point B, shoot things through and try to survive. Yeah, I don't think Left 4 Dead has any contest. Even with the spiritual successors, so to speak, like even in the Tide games, I played Vermintide, and it's just like one of the when I first started getting into Warhammer, Vermintide was one of the games that got me into it, and a lot of the time I was just thinking like, yeah, but it's not Left 4 Dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
It's so much more than Left 4 Dead, but it's not Left 4 Dead. It's kind of weird, in the sense of like, even with all these systems on top of these games and stuff, it's like I don't care, man. Sometimes you just want to play Left 4 Dead. Like sometimes simple is more, less is good. So.
Yeah, so there's another game that I was told was actually pretty close to what Left 4 Dead envisioned, but is a little more hardcore, and it's GTFO.
Oh, God.
Oh, we've played that a little bit.
GTFO is fucking brutal. That game is
it's
hard.
Really fucking tough, yeah.
Yeah, I really like those atmospheric hard games that don't really tell you what to do. Kind of reminds me of like for me it feels like a mix of The Forest and Left 4 Dead, because unlike Left 4 Dead, you can't fight everything in front of you in that game. You're actively trying to avoid it. It's more like every zombie in that game is a witch. So yeah. There was a game that came out recently that's very similar to GTFO, but I can't put my finger on it right now. But yeah, that GTFO is fucking cool as shit. 100%. Oh,
maybe that's one.
there's this game that I'm playing right now. Huge fucking fan of this game. It's called The Forever Winter. If you like GTFO, you're going to love The Forever Winter. It's not horde based, but it is kind of like in GTFO sense. You're kind of put in like a shitty situation, and you just kind of have to try to sneak around and survive and try to figure things out. I don't know if I would really draw the line of GTFO with Left 4 Dead, but I can see it. What you mean by hardcore. But when I think of Left 4 Dead,
it's very similar. I would say it's very similar.
Really?
Like, yeah, I would say so.
Because when I think Left 4 Dead, I'm like trying to find the fire axe and I'm trying to cut things in half. And GTFO,
yeah,
I'm not.
Like you said, it's a more hardcore version of Left 4 Dead, where it's just like, the cooperation you need is way crazier in that game. Also, like you said, like a lot of things can just straight up kill you in that game. There's also a bit of a stealth aspect in certain sections because you're trying not to, get killed. So you just, go slow and quiet in sections where it's just like, we can avoid conflict here, right? We don't need a fight. Where in Left 4 Dead, you don't really care. I don't want to say you don't care, but besides the witch, like you're kind of looking to fight everything, right? Because that's like the whole thing is the action, right? Whereas GTFO definitely feels a lot more kind of survival oriented in certain aspects.
Yeah.
But that is definitely one I'd give a try. And it's funny that you brought it up. Now that I'm thinking about it, I would love to go back and try that out.
Yeah, as soon as you mentioned GTFO, I was kind of like, damn, I kind of want to play that game.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, so I'll buy it if you guys want to play it.
I'll install it.
It's fun as fuck.
I'll install it.
I just remember, like, it's one of those games when you're with your boys. I've never played Lethal Company, but I hear it's kind of like the same experience of like you guys are just kind of collectively freaking out like the entire time. So yeah, GTFO is a fucking banger game.
All right, Dan, what's your next one?
So with Monster Hunter coming out recently, I kind of like was thinking to myself, okay, I remember there was a time where I wanted another Monster Hunter game, right? And then like they've kind of been feeding me pretty well lately, because they were like, okay, Space Marine 2, Ninja Gaiden 4, like they've been rebooting a lot of games that I wanted, so I kind of had to like
Ninja Gaiden 4 is a good one.
Yeah, right.
I almost put it on there, and I was like, wait, shit, no, the fucking
they just kind of came out of nowhere. Every single time I was thinking about a game that I wanted to see, they just like brought it back, and I was like, oh damn, they're like, it's either they brought it back or they're going to. Like Mechanicus was another one. They're like, oh, Mechanicus 2 is coming out.
It's a new Silent Hill game too. So.
Yeah.
Which looks really fucking cool, by the way.
But when I was playing Monster Hunter, I was just kind of like, there was a game that came out, Dragon's Dogma, right? And a lot of people were saying that was like Capcom's way of trying to get Monster Hunter into the West. But there was another game that they did before that, and it was called Lost Planet. And that game should definitely get fucking revived. Right?
Oh, yes.
So speaking of games that you can no longer play, Lost Planet 2, I remember seeing a message on Steam. I don't think they ever did fix it, but like Games for Windows Live doesn't let you play Lost Planet 2 right now. I don't believe they fixed it. I know that Capcom acknowledged the problem, but that was like 2 years ago. But for those of you who don't know, Dragon's Dogma and Lost Planet were Capcom trying to break into the West to get Monster Hunter-esque games into there. So if you ever have played Lost Planet in particular 2, it's basically pseudo Monster Hunter in the sense that there's a giant alien and you have to try to take it down. And I just remember like playing the Lost Planet 1 demo in like a Walmart with my neck breaking because they put those screens way too fucking high. And and I personally am a sucker for any world that's like a barren frozen wasteland. So if you've ever played like Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, there's Winter Peak or Frost Peak, I forget the name right now. Anything to do with ice, Iceborne was like cool as fuck when you first stepped into the land of Solania, I think it was called. But Lost Planet was basically everything I've ever wanted in like a frozen game or like a sci-fi game, right? Because it's like storm that you can't see anything that's going on. It's a very somber feel. You feel like isolated and alone. You have to, and then like out of nowhere, there's just a giant alien, and it's just like, all right, good luck. You know what I mean? And then like Lost Planet 2 doubled down on that by giving you different climates. Like Lost Planet 2 was kind of like the Monster Hunter world of Lost Planet, in the sense of like you went to another region of the world and it was more like foresty and lush, and then like the alien fights were cool. I played the demo like nonstop before I got the game, because there was that one fight where you fight this like giant kaiju looking fat turtle thing, and like there's like the point where you can get into the exosuit and then like you see it like rev up and like turn on, and it's like telling you like, oh, systems are online and shit, and you're just like digging into this monster. It breaks your robot, and then like I found out that you can grab the Gatling gun from it, and like you're just a little dude carrying this like Gatling gun 3 times your size that you ripped off of this thing's arm, and it just reminded me of like things like the great sword or the heavy bowgun, where it's just like, this guy should not be swinging this thing, or he should not be being able to carry this. And then there's parts where you could like take down the robot or take down the alien to its knees, and then you go inside of its mouth voluntarily and you like start shooting at its fucking organs from the inside. Like that game was fucking peak, man. Lost Planet 2 was fucking incredible.
Yeah,
and
I
then,
remember playing the demo a lot.
Yeah,
like,
you know what giant like
going inside the kaiju.
Yeah. There was just
they
so
had, like,
many
like
cool
fire
things
and shit, right? Like all that stuff.
Yeah, like shot that like orange fluid thing that like,
Yeah,
and like that was also your healing, which was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
The multiplayer for that game was fucking crazy as well. Like, man, Lost Planet was, I wish that they continued it, but unfortunately with 3, I think they went a little too hard in what they believed the Western market was like, which is kind of fair. This was like the time of like Modern Warfare 3 and stuff, or
okay.
So like, yeah, it was it went way too hard into like the niche sci-fi story driven gritty slop shit, you know what I mean? Like it didn't have to do that. And I think that was kind of like the death knell with Lost Planet 3. Because Lost Planet 2, you were just a bunch of fucking guys. Like you never really played as the same dudes. You played as like elite like mercenary guys in one, then you played as like raiders in the next mission, then you played as like another military op in the other. Like I never really cared about the story of Lost Planet, and I didn't need to, right? It was just giant alien there, boot ups like giant cool exosuit. If not, like you grapple everywhere. Grappling in video games is like the coolest thing ever. So Lost Planet had a bunch of that. But like the atmosphere, the world, I remember like the plants would try to like snap you up as you're trying to make it to your next objective. It was just so peak, dude. I don't know any other way to describe it than just how awesome it was.
I do have good news for you, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Capcom said that they are working on several games for Windows Live games, and Lost Planet 2 is on that list.
Yeah, but they said that like 3 years ago.
At least right now, according to some stuff that they're doing, they're updating some of those titles on Steam to make them available for purchase and stuff. So that's what they said that they're working on.
Yeah, because you can boot up Lost Planet on Steam, but like it'll lock you behind a Games for Windows live screen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember seeing that like maintenance acknowledgement announcement on the Steam page for years at this point. I haven't checked recently, but every single once in a while I get the itch to play Lost Planet, and then it's just like, oh yeah, that's right, I can't.
Yep.
But yeah, either if they went back to like the more survival aspect of Lost Planet 1 or the more cooperative of 2, it would just be really cool to see that game, especially because like Monster Hunter kind of already broke into the West, and I don't see like why it would hurt Capcom to try to get Lost Planet through, especially with something like Dragon's Dogma 2, because like Dragon Dogma 1 wasn't like huge, you know what I mean? And 2 sold like really well. There was a lot of hype around that game. I don't see how bringing back Lost Planet is going to be an issue for them. I think it does need like a huge rebrand though. Like I don't think you call it Lost Planet 4. I think you just go Lost Planet XYZ. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because I don't think you want the titular number progression thing with this, especially after such a stinker like 3. But something like Lost Planet, where it's like a more somber kind of like Armored Core feeling Monster Hunter game, I think would be really sick to bring back. So that's my pick. Go to fucking
I think
series.
that's a I think that's a great pick.
That's
that
a
I didn't even,
fantastic pick.
yeah, that I didn't even think.
Yeah, I feel like
about,
every
so
single time you
that's-
bring up Lost Planet, either nobody knows what it is, or they're like, I was never into it, but like mad respect. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Genuinely, I think you could call that like a truly underrated game.
Yeah, no, Lost Planet is
Yes.
an underrated game, 100%.
and it's funny that you talk about that like the aspects of like Monster Hunter. I never thought about it that way, but it actually pretty much is like a sci-fi.
Yeah, it's sci-fi Monster Hunter.
Yeah.
It just started going the wrong direction when they started making it more of like a cover shooter, because this was at the time when people were also
Yeah.
judging things like I mean, it came out at the same era of like Resident Evil 5, right? And like Resident Evil
Yeah.
5 was an amazing game until you got to the end where you were basically just shooting a bunch of other soldiers. Lost Planet kind of had that too, where it was like, okay, I get that you're trying to reach out to the modern like Eastern audience at the time, or Western audience at the time, but like not everyone likes the cover shooter Capcom. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and then like that wasn't only a thing for that game, because Resident Evil 5 had it too. A lot of people didn't like those segments.
On the note of sci-fi adding like shooter sections to it when it misses that. You guys remember Aliens Colonial Marines?
God, that game was so cool.
Like,
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
There was
So,
also like
just-
Aliens Fireteam Elite was another good one.
Fireteam Elite is good. Colonial Marines was a nightmare when it came out. I mean,
Oh
Yeah,
wait, yeah,
just-
no, I'm getting the confused. Yeah, Colonial Marines was a nightmare. Yeah.
yeah. I think you might be thinking of Alien vs Predator, which is fucking dope.
yeah.
That where you play as one of the three. Anyways, but the fact that like it's in the title, it's aliens, and you are the Marines, and you should be fighting these aliens in the same way that today we have the Helldivers and they fight the Terminids. They
Mhm.
decided to inject random mercenaries for you to shoot at that could shoot back because of the shooter hype. So I get what you mean. So is that what happened to 3? Is that where like the first 2 games were only about fighting alien monsters, and then the third one
No.
decided to just throw in there like mercenary shooter or whatever?
2 had mercenary shooter elements to it as well. But like 3 was just like it started like focusing on a like one protagonist in particular. The story was just kind
okay.
of shit, and it just started going against a lot of the things that was like central to Lost Planet. You know what I mean? They tried bringing back kind of like the nostalgia hype by bringing it back to like a pure Frost planet, so to speak. But it's just like, I don't know, just like time after time that game just started to fall flat. And you just didn't want to play it anymore after a while. Which kind of sucked, because like 2 was amazing. So it's kind of hard to put your finger on what made 3 so bad, but you just kind of play it and you're like, yeah, I get it, and then you just kind of forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was so bad it killed the franchise. So
Basically, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
a lot of 3s killed the franchise.
Dead
Dawn
Space.
of War 3, yeah, Dead Space 3.
Dead Space. Yeah. Shit. Well, maybe Valve's onto something.
Yeah, Valve's like, no, we're not doing it. Dota 2, Left 4 Dead 2.
Half-Life 2,
Half-Life
episode
2,
1.
All right. That's a great pick. I love that. As soon as you said it, I was like, oh shit, Lost Planet. I forgot about that.
Great choice.
My next one I have, I mean, it's not a surprise. Splinter Cell.
Oh my goodness.
Word. Yeah.
The last time Splinter Cell came out, or a game came out, was August 20th, 2013, and that was Splinter Cell Blacklist. There's talks that they are doing a remake of the first Splinter Cell, which I hope do come to light and it's actually good. I'm a little scared because Splinter Cell 1 is my personal favorite one. But besides that, Blacklist was a great game. I thought it was headed in a great direction, where Conviction was a lot more action oriented. Blacklist kind of dialed that back in certain aspects, and they kind of, I don't want to say dialed it back, but they let you choose how you play, and kind of like Dishonored in a way, right? So if you want to play that super shooter action focused, you can. If you want to play a mix, you can. And if you want to play more traditionally, where maybe you don't kill anybody or only kill people that you have to, or temporarily like knock them out or something and play super deliberate, you can. And I think it did it in a good way. Where I felt like neither route was lacking as much as the others, but it's been a while since I've played it. But for me, no other franchise really does stealth as good as Splinter Cell, personally. The only other two that, like, for me come close is Metal Gear and Dishonored. And Dishonored is a big one for me. That was one I was thinking about on putting on this list. But there's just something about Splinter Cell of, that allure of being a spy, and that allure of it being more modern conflict, and the allure of playing Sam Fisher, that it just draws me to that versus something like a Dishonored. As much as I love Dishonored, Splinter Cell just has like a special place in my heart. And Sam Fisher is a good part of that. I mean, I'm not going to get too much into that because we already did last episode, but he just feels awesome to play. I hope if they ever do bring it back, we need Michael Ironside back to voice him, hopefully. And if they do bring it back, I would love it to be kind of almost in a way a spiritual successor to Chaos Theory, which is the third game in the franchise. But I guess talking about like what we were talking about earlier, correct me if I'm wrong, but like in general, the stealth game franchise is, or genre is a genre that's not really explored as much as it was previously.
Yeah,
like a lot of those like
what's
games
happened
have
with
like
that
kind of
is that they've
died out.
rolled it into other games.
Yeah, and my issue with that is like 90% of the time it's really poorly implemented. It's just kind of dog shit.
Stealth archers.
And yeah. But like, I wonder how some like a I guess maybe another installment of Splinter Cell would do in today's day and age, where everything is so fast paced, focused, and like competitive focused. Which you definitely can get with Splinter Cell. I don't know if you guys know, but in starting with 2 with Pandora Tomorrow, there is a multiplayer game mode in those games.
Yeah, I've seen gameplay. It looks cool as hell.
They are very, very highly lauded. Unfortunately, when I played Splinter Cell, I wasn't able to play multiplayer at that time, so I've only ever played through the campaigns. And now, I mean, I haven't gone through the try to get that set up, because I think there is like mods or servers that you can to play Pandora Tomorrow or Chaos Theory multiplayer. But it was mercenaries versus spies, and it was like an asymmetrical, like I think Pandora Tomorrow is 2v2, and then Chaos Theory expanded it to either 3 or 4v4. But a lot of people, when you bring that up, spies versus mercenaries, man, you could see their eyes light up and everything. But that I just wonder like if maybe there is a market for that. But I definitely would be one that day one to just to show support in general would buy another Splinter Cell game, in a jiffy. So you guys haven't really played Splinter Cell that much, right?
I have not, unfortunately.
I've only played Conviction is the one we played, right?
Yeah.
That's the only one I've played.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I have played a bit of Metal Gear, but the Splinter Cell games unfortunately just went on my radar. I think I played one of them at a friend's house. It was like the opening level. I don't remember too much about it, truth be told. I remember playing it is pretty much it. I have seen a lot of people play the Spies versus Mercenaries mode. Am I remembering this correctly? Is that where it's asymmetrical perspective, so the mercenaries are first person and the spies are third person, or am I thinking of something completely different? Yeah, it is?
Nope,
okay.
That's it. Yep.
Okay, word. Yeah, that's cool as hell. That's a really cool concept, I think.
Yeah, so like the mercenaries are a lot like more of like your bulkier standard first person shooter. So they got like grenades and stuff like that, while the spies are more like agile, and I don't know if they gave them weapons eventually, but I think they never had weapons. But then they have a lot of like very tricky things, like they have some flashbangs. You can temporarily knock out like the mercenaries and stuff, and like the end goal was the mercenaries were there to like kind of like I guess defend an area. And it was kind of I guess you can liken it a little bit to CS in that way. So like there was like 2 to 3 uh I guess computers that the spies would try to hack. And the mercenaries were there to basically stop them in that aspect. So it was really cool because like, you know, if you wanted to play like each side played vastly different than the other, but they were still really fun to play, and the asymmetrical nature of it like just added a lot of replayability and a lot of really unique gameplay. You know, like
Yeah.
I said, there's still people that run custom servers to play those.
Yeah.
So that's my second pick. Alex, you have anything else you wanna, or your last pick that you wanna bring to the
My
table?
last pick, I am cheating with this one. I fully admit it. But I have for good reason in that I think this franchise is dead. I just don't think it's buried yet.
Okay.
I'm talking about Mass Effect.
Oh my
Now,
goodness.
Okay.
yeah, it breaks my heart to admit it. Mass Effect is my favorite franchise in gaming. I love the universe. I love the characters. Also, BioWare is not what they used to be, and
Yeah.
to look at like they've released 40-second teasers and like one teaser trailer 3 or 4 years ago, and now they're saying, oh well, it's probably not going to be done until like 2029. I'm like, this game, I give it like 80-20 odds that it doesn't come out, or at least it doesn't get made by BioWare before EA takes them out back and shoots them in the head.
Have you heard about that BioWare dev that made that one YouTube video kind of calling people out about being mean in the gaming space?
What?
Yeah, there was some like
No, I didn't
BioWare.
hear that.
There's a BioWare dev that made a YouTube video saying that like your $70 doesn't buy you coolness to like critique game developers and be mean and attack them, and I was like,
What?
okay. I think he worked in Anthem, like, or something like
Oh
that.
yeah,
but he was like
yeah.
he was an
there's something
You're
ex-bio.
allowed to
that.
critique anything you want to critique,
Well, like
Yeah.
his
regardless
whole
if you buy
I
the
think
product or not.
one of
I
his
think
big-
personal attacks is where I draw the line there.
No, yeah, I would not personally. Obviously, I
think
think
if you're
that's dumb.
no, like if you're going on social media and talking shit to somebody, you know, like threatening them, then that's one thing. But like his entire point, like that he was kind of putting on, was also just saying like, "Oh, it's just a game. Remember that." And it's like, yeah, but you're asking people $70. Like, it's not just a game for a lot of people. It's $70 worth of things that they can spend their money on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So-
I think that's a fair criticism.
And I remember
So,
looking at that, and somebody was just like, they're like, this doesn't feel like it was a BioWare employee from when we knew BioWare. You know what I mean? To just
Yeah.
kind of like tie back to the point where you were saying like BioWare has kind of gone in a direction where it's only a matter of time before they have their death knell. And I remember I saw that online, and I was like, this guy doesn't seem to me like the kind that made Mass Effect that everyone loves. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you can tell me the name, I can maybe tell you if they were on the project. But I don't want to dig into that too much, just because I think that's going out the confines of
Yeah.
the conversation. But on the note of BioWare, most of those writers have left. The people who wrote and led Mass Effect and Dragon Age, like the peak of their kind of popularity,
Right.
they're gone. Some of them were still around for this most recent Veilguard game. Just quick notes on Veilguard. I played it. I liked it enough in that I didn't feel like I wasted my money, but I can definitely agree that this was not, anywhere near the quality that it needed to be. I think it was the best BioWare game to come out in the last 10 years. So, that's saying something. And I think it was a good sequel to Dragon Age Inquisition. But as a member of the Dragon Age franchise, I think it fails in a lot of places. Anyways, Mass Effect 4, and I think that is probably going to be the actual name, has been announced. And again, trailers have come out. They feature Liara, who's one of the major characters from the first 3 games. I think it's a really bad idea to so 3 ended in such a way that you really can't keep going with this same set of characters. And if you do, you're gonna have to come up with some like real invalidating, some explanation that I think is only going to invalidate the choices you made while playing those 3 games. So, when I say I want Mass Effect to be revived, I don't mean I want Mass Effect 4. I'm saying I want something in the universe of Mass Effect that is told probably close to around the time the original story is told from a different perspective. Sure, a spin-off, I guess you could call it. But they already have a spin-off in Andromeda, and that game was bad. I just want to go back to the Milky Way galaxy, which is where the franchise is set, and be able to explore that with a different story. But, familiar locations, faces that kind of hallmark the franchise. I think Mass Effect's greatest strength is its universe and its characters. The universe is really cool. It's like this cosmopolitan galaxy. This isn't like some, more Warhammer-y kind of attitude where everyone's waiting to kill each other. It is
feels almost realistic.
It feels very realistic, right? Where everyone kind of joins together for the idea of peace in this galaxy that needs to cooperate. It's not perfect. There are some areas that don't adhere to that. There's some species which are more averse to that than others. And there's history there too that is observed and told to you through the franchise, and it creates some very realistic reactions and dynamics with the characters. So there's a galaxy's worth of exploration to be done. And the fact that I think they're stuck on Commander Shepard and those characters from the first 3 games is an incredibly limiting factor. We had that story beginning to end. You're not going to be able to add on that in a meaningful way for me. If anything, if you touch it, you're going to hurt it.
They're going to Star Wars the shit out of it.
Yeah, right.
Which I hope they don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a game I want to go back and play too. There's so many games I want to go back and play that we talk about where I'm just like, fuck, that is a good game, but
yeah. So I'd like some, even with outside the confines of the genre, I would certainly prefer it to be more like Mass Effect's action RPG, where you are the leader of a group of people, you make friends with them, you build relationships with them, and then you explore this galaxy and kind of have an adventure. But I'd also be cool with something like a genre jumping deal in the same universe. So like one thing that I think is underrated in Mass Effect is like the naval, the space combat that is absent from the games. I think there's something there with just the lore they've written about how the ships work and how every nation builds their fleets. So maybe some like space combat simulator or something like that, right? Which just kind of expands the scope of the universe. But yeah, if I had to make a new Mass Effect game, it would be set either parallel to the main story or a little bit before it, and tell the stories of a whole bunch of different characters, and maybe there's like an ounce of overlap in who you interact with and where you go. But at the same time, you're still there with the different factions and races that you've come to love by playing Commander Shepard's story. So, and the multiplayer for 3 should come back. I think incredible cooperative shooter, like Wave Survival.
That was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. So, yes, I am cheating. Mass Effect, technically not dead. Also, we have to wait.
I mean, when did Andromeda come out?
Andromeda came out in, I want to say 2017. Let's find out.
That's a good amount of time, right?
2017. So if it comes out in 2029, there'll have been 12 years between titles.
I mean, even now, it's still like, what, 8 years? So
yeah.
And I think the negative reaction to that was pretty much killed off. Killed it off for now, I guess. But I think that's a great choice. A great pick, personally, even though you're technically cheating.
Yeah, I'm sure if you go back and play Andromeda, it's not as bad as like the reactions to it were. It's still not the same. And sure, maybe there was some Bioware magic. I think there was just some really great writers who cared a lot about the universe they were writing in. I think those people are gone. There is, I believe, a spiritual successor to Mass Effect coming out soon. I've completely forgotten the name.
Starfield.
No. A completely different gameplay formulas, by the way. Oh God, it is by like senior BioWare devs who left and made their own studio. I think
It's coming out
I
soon.
can't remember the name. It was announced at the Game Awards 2 years ago.
Forever Winter. I don't know.
No, let me. BioWare devs. Exodus. That's it.
Yeah,
So
I haven't heard of it.
oh, was that the one with Matthew McConaughey?
I don't think so. It might have been. You might be right.
I thought there was one. There was one that was like a space game, and it might have not been Exodus, but it had like Matthew McConaughey, and he walked up and he was talking about the game, and he voices the protagonist.
It
I don't remember if it was Exodus, but
high sci-fi games are kind of like not in my scope of interest lately.
Yeah, you like the nitty gritty shit on your boots, fucking type of sci-fi.
I like
games,
to suffer
right?
when I play games.
I like both. I definitely like both. I enjoy more political stuff, like because Mass Effect has a lot of political, conversation in it, and I really enjoy that. But I also really enjoy the just throw 20 million aliens and robots at me sci-fi type shit, like that Warhammer or something like Helldivers does, so
for sure. I think that there's a lot. I mean, I love both genres too, right? That
you can make sci-fi really cool.
You can
either way,
just straight up.
Yeah.
So I just miss. So we've had a lot of fantasy games with that vibe where you meet this crew of companions and you go on this grand adventure together. I don't think any sci-fi game has met that since Mass Effect.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
And this might be something crazy, and I don't know, maybe I guess it's a little bit of a trend chasing question. How would you feel if they made a Mass Effect spin-off or the next Mass Effect game to be more of a CRPG? Because the way I think about Mass Effect, it's kind of like half RPG, half shooter, right?
Yeah.
You would be losing that shooter aspect, but you'd play more into the abilities of, and I guess the planning of your characters, ideally, than normal. How would you feel about that? Or would you want to strictly try to preserve the half RPG, half shooter thing of it?
Ooh.
Because I feel like that'd be, even though it's not like the next Mass Effect main installment, maybe it'd be a really cool spin-off.
That is a great question. I don't think I'd want something like an isometric CRPG. I'd be cool if it was more RPG-like, and I think the first game is maybe that idea. I think I definitely prefer the action side of it, but I do think that they leaned more in the action as the scope of conflict rose in the games.
Yeah, for sure.
So the third game is straight up like an all-out, like life or death war, and is also the most dynamic when it comes to the way the combat works. Whereas the first game is a lot more stiff in combat, but is like a tighter story, I guess.
What's your favorite Mass Effect, if you don't mind me asking?
Mass Effect 2.
That seems to be most.
I think that's I was gonna say mine is number 1.
So 2, I think, is the best because it has the best companions, because there's like 12 of them. And all of them have really fleshed out cool stories. You have to do fun loyalty missions for them. There are actual stakes with the finale, especially, like people can die permanently, and that will carry over in the 3 quite substantially. I think the writing is typically the best in 2. The combat isn't quite there yet. I think it gets to its best in 3 for sure. But the storytelling for me is great, in that it really is a game that says the story is you are going to have a kick-ass sci-fi adventure. Go have fun. Yeah, I'd like that same kind of idea with like a Mass Effect reboot or spin-off, where the idea is here's this cool galaxy with a ton of lore, species to interact with, characters to fall in love with. Here's a goal you have. Have fun doing it.
Okay.
So
I've heard really good things from the Warhammer Road Trader CRPG. Like, I know a lot of people really like the characters in that story. So I guess if you want nitty gritty CRPG sci-fi. There's that.
I've touched Rogue Trader before. It's good.
Yeah.
It's not exactly what I'm looking for, though.
Yeah.
And I think on the note of combat, I'll go back to that. Mass Effect is a really cool class system with like the different types of class you can be, either tech based or like psychic biotic based. And I think that needs to be implemented in a way that makes you feel powerful and not like you're just hitting an ability on a bar. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that being said, Dan, you want to give us your last pick?
Yeah. So I don't know if Alex is caught up with this title, but Mike, you've heard me bitch about it plenty. It is the last release, I believe, was in 2005. So 20 years ago. Yeah, 20 years ago, the last true game, I guess, that I recognized was the Mega Man Battle Network series. So
this guy,
yeah,
we have a friend who really loves Mega Man Battle Network. We gotta bring him on sometime.
There has been more past the original 6, but they don't count. Those things are garbage. Like the fucking Star Force ones, no.
Yeah. Okay.
So, Alex, to describe this to you, they recently came out with a collection. So if you are interested in getting it, it came out like half a year ago. Capcom released 1 through 3 and then 4 through 6. If you're gonna play it, play 4 through 6.
Wait, are they on sale right now? Are they on sale right now?
I don't know, but you better fucking buy it. You know what this dingus did, Alex? I told him to buy the 4 through 6 one. He buys the 1 through 3 one, refunds it, and then says, "Oh, the sale ended. I'll buy it next time." And then buys fucking Monster Hunter. And I'm just like, "What the hell, man? You promised me for a year that you would try it." Okay. The reason I think Michael would like it,
it's on sale now,
and the reason that I think a lot of people would like this game is because it was basically like a direct competitor to like the Pokemon craze that was happening in the Game Boy days, right?
Interesting.
The idea is largely the same, right? It's basically like an open world where you follow a kind of okay story and then you fight stuff and collect stuff, right? Now, the difference is that when I played Pokemon, like I played Final Fantasy and stuff.
You hated the turn-based shit, right?
But that's why I'm opening with, I've played Final Fantasy and I liked Final Fantasy. I liked turn-based. But like Pokemon was always super shallow to me when it came to those systems. Like I remember playing like Pokemon Yellow and Pokemon Leaf Green the most. And I remember just grabbing a Snorlax, giving him Sleep Talk, and Hyper Beam, and then just like blasting through the game. And I was like, this is so fucking boring. Like, that game just felt like a bunch of Rattatas swarmed you for 9 hours, and then eventually you got to fight something kind of dangerous. You know what I mean?
I will say to that end, if you play Pokemon against other people, you realize how deep the Pokemon system is.
Yes.
It's the fucking playing against the AI that is complete dog shit, and I completely agree with you on that end.
So
that it is way too easy, and you can just steamroll it, right? You don't have to think about anything.
Mm-hmm.
When I grew up as a kid, you would only ever have attack abilities on your Pokemon, right? But then once you actually start to play competitive, it's like you have like 2, and then the other 2 are either supportive like abilities or stuff. And a lot of Pokemon that were like kind of whack before are like really good and shit.
Yeah, it's like Warhammer, Total War Warhammer 3, where like things that are good in campaign are not good in multiplayer for various reasons.
Yeah, and like you said, I guess that if you've never played against other people, I could see the Pokemon like system being very shallow and whack.
But we'll get to that because this game, it doesn't play turn-based necessarily. The way that the game works is that it's a 3x3 grid system where you're at, and a 3x3 grid system where like the wild Pokemon, or known as viruses in this game, are, right? So largely the same thing. You walk around the world, you'll have a random spawn, you'll fight a little trash enemy. Sometimes they're trash, sometimes they genuinely try to fuck you up, depending on how far you are into the game. But the way that the game works is that you select battle chips by basically building a deck, right? If you've ever played a game like, again, Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, this is probably the best comparison. But it's a lot to do kind of like with Magic, like we were talking earlier. You can get like 3 chips of a kind of like the rule of 4 in Magic, and then like every couple of seconds you can go and select your chips, and you can select them based on their if they have a similar code, which is based on the alphabet. So if you have like 3 A chips, you can select them if they're not the same type of chips. Or if you have like 3 cannons, you can select 3 cannons at the same time, right? So like it's kind of like a card deck building game, but then like you use those battle chips and go into, battle, and then you use them as kind of like items in a way. So like you can have a Gatling gun, a sword that hits 3 panels, a sword that hits 2 panels. Um so it also kind of helps if you've played Darkest Dungeon. It's kind of the same way too, where like abilities in Darkest Dungeons maybe hit the second rank or the fourth rank or the first 2 ranks. It's kind of like that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like a grid system. Another good game to compare this to is the Fractured Butthole, the South Park game. Where it's like it's like a 6x6, kind of like depending on where you move in these areas is where your attacks come from and stuff. So not only does it have a far more intuitive battle system than something like Pokemon, right? Because you have like free space to move around. You can also like combine battle chips to make different combos. So like if you combine 3 high cannons, like say you have a high cannon with an A code, a B code, and a C code, you can combine those two to make a Giga Cannon, and that does like 400 damage as opposed to 80, right? So there's like a bunch of like building there where you want to like combo your chips together. And then the coolest part probably is that if you've played any Mega Man game, you know that Mega Man can like wield different weapons based on like bosses he's defeated in the past. Where they kind of got the Pokemon thing was like in Pokemon Green, or in let's say like Ruby and Sapphire, you have like Gyarados and Kyogre, right? And you were only able to get those Pokemons in those games. But from my understanding, those games are like largely the same past that, right, Mike?
For the most part, yeah.
Okay, so like in Mega Man,
Minor differences.
yeah. So I'm gonna use Mega Man 6 for this example, because 6 was like peak Mega Man Battle Network in my opinion. But this happened in 5 as well, and I think with 4 as well. You have something called like crossover souls, which is kind of like when Mega Man like gets like, I don't know, Leaf Cutter or something like that, or like the Electric Spark abilities. So if you played, there was Gregar and Falzar, right? Gregar was like a ground beast, and then Falzar was like a bird beast. And then each of those games had 5 separate souls that you couldn't get in the other games, and they were both like antithesis to each other. So in Gregar, you for the first soul you get is Heat Soul, but in Falzar you get Aqua Soul, right? And obviously the element kind of counter type also works in this game. So Aqua Soul beats fire because water beats fire, but then the second soul that Falzar gets is wood, which fire beats wood, right? But then the second soul that Gregar gets is electricity, which wood beats electricity. So those two games counteract themselves. And going on to like the multiplayer point that we were talking about is there is so much times where like you might cross into fire and your opponent crosses into water the same turn, and now you're completely fucked. You know what I mean? Not like completely, but like you'll take double damage for the next thing that you take hits for, and you'll lose your crossover soul, which is like such a power boost. So my point being that like it's not just one Pokemon, it's like the entire progression of the story is the same, but the things that you get are vastly different, right? Like even the chips that you can get on one game are completely different than the other. Like I think one of them is like Cross Divide versus Giga Fist. So it really warrants that like if you get both games, yeah, it'll be largely the same story, but there's like still elements to it that are completely different that allow you to enjoy both games, even though it's like again the same generic story. But you have like different souls, different combos that you can do with the souls. Every soul has like its own little attribute, like Wood Soul, or Tomahawk Soul. It turns all the panels into grass panels, and then if you're in Wood Soul, you get to heal off of those. Or if you have like a Race Soul, which is like a search custom type, he allows you to stun people if their health is 6, which is really cool. Like any digit in their health is 6. If you use like a standard element chip, like a cannon, you'll automatically stun them. So there's like a cool amount of varieties on on what the souls can do. They're like the Mega Man Buster changes on each soul, so they like it has a different element. Like Aqua Soul hits the first 2 panels, whereas like Fire Soul is a 3-panel wide sweep. Like there's just so much elements to it that there's like a YouTube channel online of this guy. I think his name is like Blue Star something, that he covers like every single variety of chip because they have so many different behaviors, right? And when you like put that in the multiplayer thing where it's like not only are you and an opponent just casting things back and forth, but like you also have to account for movement, right? Because somebody can easily sidestep one of your abilities if it's just like a straight hit or something. or like somebody could play a little bit safer and kind of lock you out. And there's like panel breaking too, so somebody could trap you to where you can't move. But say if you have like a wind soul, then you can move over broken panels. Like the game is just so fucking intricate, man. Like it has like no end to how you can approach a situation, especially in the multiplayer scene. But like bar that, since we were talking about collection, the coolest part about that game too is that like collecting battle chips is not just like I collected two types of Ratatats or and like a fucking Staryu, you know, like you don't really care about it after that. You're just trying to collect them to fill your Pokedex. Like in Mega Man, like every chip has a purpose. They might not be the best, but like even the shittiest chip can be combined with something to make like a really strong attack sometimes. So you have like the whole chip collecting thing, and then like from my understanding when I played Pokemon, like beating like hard Pokemon isn't exactly hard, right? But like there's different varieties of bosses in the game. There's like, let's say Proto Man. There's Proto Man, Proto Man EX, and then Proto Man SP. And like Proto Man SP is a really fucking hard boss fight. Like that guy two taps you. But his chip you get by killing his SP variant. And that kind of like adds more to that kind of collector thing where like you're not just playing the game and collecting thing for collection's sake, but like it's a boss fight that's really fucking hard and it'll give you one of the strongest chips in like the game, and then it also fills your collection binder, right? And like Giga chips have like a lot of collection behind them. There's different tier of chips, kind of like in Magic. There's like rare, common, uncommon, mythic, and rare.
Yeah.
There's like Giga, Mega, Standard, and then I think there's another chip type that I'm forgetting. But it's just like if you want to do the collection thing in Pokemon, it's there, right? If you want to do like the more intricate battle, it fucking sweeps Pokemon under the rug, in my opinion. Like everything, I honestly think that if it wasn't for the hype of Pokemon, that Mega Man would have taken that genre over back in the Game Boy days. But like it had such a weak start was the problem, because like Mega Man 1 through 4, 1 through 3 were just kind of mid. But like 4 and especially 5 and 6, those games like sweep any Pokemon game that I've ever played under the rug, like no questions asked. And that's without a bias, because I didn't start those games. My brother introduced me to them, and I wasn't like a super crackhead into them. But the more I grew up and the more I continue to play them, even after I've played plenty of Pokemon, I'm just like, yeah, this isn't Mega Man, dude. Like, this game does not fucking hold up. If you like Pokemon and you wish you could have more out of it, like a little bit more hardcore, fucking play Mega Man, dude. That game is incredible.
So I want to ask you, let's look outside of Pokemon. Is there a game that's come out within the last, again, 20 years, I think you said, that has come even close to having like that dynamic level that you're looking for with that like Battle Network comes with?
The only game I can think of that kind of has that, like, is kind of Fire Emblem in a way. Not that it plays the same way, but like it has like a kind of level of depth. But Fire Emblem, I would even argue, is still cheap, because like Fire Emblem is just kind of like what you equip your guy with and what skills he has, right? But Mega Man is like deck building and then fighting, right? That's like the difference. It's kind of like in Total War, how you have like setting up your army on how you want to play and then actually executing it, right? Because if you have 4 skills, you kind of know what you're going to do next, right? Especially when like that's the only thing you really have to think about. But in a game, say like an RTS or Total War, something like that, you not only like just taking your units and like pressing a button doesn't do anything, right? You have to like consistently continue playing the game. And 9 times out of 10 is like, since it's kind of like a card game in a way, you're not going to get the chip you need all the time. So you have to like figure out what you're going to do, right? Because I think you can only hold up to 5 chips at a time, unless you like have this thing that lets you hold 2 more. So say like you're in the middle of a fight and you're like really low on HP and you really need a heal, like you might not be able to heal, right? Because you don't have that chip and you have to survive another round of combat. Or if you have like Dust Soul, right, then you can turn into Dust Soul and then discard your chips and redraw 5, and then you maybe get that healing chip that you need. You know what I mean? Like it's way more intricate, because I feel like a lot of games kind of like once you get there, you're just kind of fucked. You know what I mean? And it's in like this like turn-based combat one. Like if you don't have that thing ready going in, you just kind of lose. And you can kind of say that with Mega Man, because you have to like deck build correctly in order to, have those resources available to you. But then you also have to like think about how you're approaching things in combat. does the enemy have your weakness element, right? Do you have theirs? Do you have a way to get theirs? Is there a way that maybe this one boss that moves too much where you can trap him into a certain area of the map and then just like fucking go at him? When's the right time to use the beast out or the beast over soul? Because if you use beast over, that's like your last ditch effort, then your HP goes to 1 and you instantly fucking die in your next attack. Like I don't think there really is, to answer your question. Not into the level of what Mega Man delivers as like those games that's like an open world collectathon, kind of like Pokemon. Because there's not many of those games, to be honest, that like kind of try to contend Pokemon. But I would argue that the depth of Mega Man is way, 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 way farther.
Okay. Do you see any possibility of that kind of like game coming back? No.
Yeah.
I mean, Mega Man itself is kind of in a weird spot. Right?
Are they doing a movie or something? I feel like I saw something from Mega Man recently.
Like, they brought back the Mega Man Zero games. That's something that
Secret Level.
Well,
I think there's a Secret Level.
Yeah.
Oh, is there? Okay, cool.
They brought back like the Mega Man Zero collection, kind of like they did the Mega Man Battle Network one, and that kind of like woke people up because they were like, "Whoa, Mega Man Zero!" That's a game I thought about talking, but Mega Man Zero being like, the collection's coming back. Does that mean they might do something with it? And then like 3 years passed and nothing happened. And then same with like the Mega Man Battle Network games. They released the collection earlier last year, and people were like, "Well, we kind of said the same about Zero, and look where we're at." You know what I mean? I think those games are a bygone era. They were like the Game Boy portable games. I don't think that Capcom has an interest on like trying to pursue a more modernized version. They kind of did with the DS, and it ended up being garbage, which are the Star Force games. I just don't think that like it would compete very well. Not that Pokemon's really in a strong place anyway. My understanding is like the last couple Pokemon games have been kind of trash.
Nah,
no?
Scarlet and Violet was great.
Was it? Okay.
If you for the gameplay aspect, I think it was great.
Wasn't it like Sword and Shield that people were shitting on or something?
Yes.
Okay.
That one,
also,
got a lot of flack.
Scarlet and Violet was the highest selling game in the franchise. So
okay, because I know that there was that like talk about I don't know why people drew the comparison between Power World and Pokemon, but there was that sense that
also don't know.
Yeah. My point being that there was that like overall sentiment of like, wow, Pokemon has gotten really stale over the years, hasn't it? You know what I mean? And I think like a lot of times I tell people like, well, have you played Mega Man? And they're like, what the fuck is that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like if people would actually give it a fucking chance, then they would see why that game is so fucking incredible. Because it really is. It's just like, it starts off slow, but so does Pokemon. The mainline series, the 1 through 3s, I don't think you play them. I think you go straight to 5 and 6. And you kind of have to get through the rut of playing a Pokemon game, so to speak, and like, fighting Rattatats and bushes all day. But once you get to endgame, especially when you get to the multiplayer, man, there's no comparison, man. Like every single time, like when the collection came out and me and my brother were playing versus each other, it was like the same fun we had when we were kids, and it's just like constantly trying to outsmart each other, or like try to like he has these chips, or he has this soul that like allows you this much board control, so how do you react to that, right? Or like if you both transform to different souls in the same turn and one has the weakness, you have to play it safe, because they might deal double damage to you in a very, very hard hitting move, and then you have to try to survive till the next draw to change your soul. And then at that point it's like, well, do I change or do I not? Because maybe they're going to change, or maybe I can find a chip that knocks them out of their soul. Or maybe if I change, they're going to try to call my bluff and then change souls with me and then continue to get me double damage. Like, at no point playing Pokemon have I had to think about things like that. I'm just like, oh, okay, he might put me to sleep, and then I don't know.
It's funny that you talk about that, because at least in the main downfall for Pokemon nowadays, besides now the performance issues and the animations, it's all everything besides the gameplay, in my opinion. Is that everything's kind of babyified in terms of like gameplay and how they kind of hold your hand, and things are like too easy. While they still hold on to certain things that are like they haven't changed or fixed.
Yeah.
But I guess what I was saying is like hearing you talking about like all these like choices, and like thinking about like, oh, do I swap my souls? Like If I do, is he gonna swap with me and everything? That's like competitive Pokemon to a T. Protect is such a highly coveted move in competitive Pokemon because you can do insane reads and stuff that most people won't go for, stuff like that. It's really cool to watch.
Yeah, but I think the thing that I like the most is that, kind of like if you've ever played an Armored Core game, half of Armored Core is just sitting in the bay fixing your robot. You know what I mean? And a lot of Mega Man was that for me, was just like sitting in my folder being like, how do I optimize my chipset?
Yeah, I definitely understand that. Yeah, that sounds cool.
Because like I would just be there like, okay, I have Canon A and B, but I don't have Canon C. But asterisk counts as any letters, so I can put A, B, asterisk, and still get a Giga Cannon in here. Great. Like there's just so much intuitiveness to it, man. And once you like find out and really get into the systems of it, you could spend fucking hours playing that fucking game.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and talk about my last pick. And that's gonna be Jak and Daxter.
Wag. Ratchet
Spider. Yeah, but it's not dead. They just released a game like a couple years ago. And a very good one.
I never understood the difference between both games because I've never played Jak and Daxter, so I'd be interested.
Oh, there's a very big difference in my opinion between both games. So Jak 3, just to give some context, came out November 8th, 2004. So 21 years ago. It's a franchise a lot of people really like, and in my opinion, Naughty Dog's best franchise. With maybe Crash in second, and Last of Us and Uncharted are also really good. They're all like at least 9 out of 10 franchises, right? Yeah. But for me personally, I like Jak and Daxter and Crash more. But the first reason I thought of Jak and Daxter, and honestly is my number one pick if I had to bring a franchise back from the dead, the protagonists, both Jak and Daxter, play off of each other very well. They're a lot more... So Ratchet and Clank, Ratchet's a lot more of a... They're like a little bit more sarcastic and everything, and Clank's a lot more of a lighthearted, good, willed robot, where Jak and Daxter, they're both... they've got more flaws and are written on a more layered level. Jak in the first game, he's a silent protagonist, and the only time you get any personality from him is from his facial expressions, and the way he reacts to things. And Daxter is kind of like the he's the one who does all the talking for them two. But they play off of each other very well. But like later down the line, they develop very well with 2 and 3. There's a drastic change in the franchise, because number 1's a lot more of a lighthearted 3D platform, almost collectathon type thing, like Banjo and Kazooie and stuff like that. It's still got some very cool mysterious stuff to it, but 2 and 3, they kind of turned those into GTA likes. And Jak gets a voice in starting 2, right?
Yeah.
And he's kind of an asshole, man. The things happen to him, and he's definitely a lot more edgy than Ratchet, but he's our hero, and he is a hero, but he does have that edge to him more than somebody compared to Ratchet or something. And Daxter plays very well with him in that Daxter's a lot more of a lighthearted, funny guy. He's always making jokes and quips, but he also does things that kind of they're very not hard-headed. What's the word I'm looking for? I guess he doesn't think when he's doing stuff, right? That gets them into very precarious situations. That's really funny. But both of them, they interact very well. The characters that they meet along the way, they interact with them very well too. I love the way they're written, and I think they're very well written, fun to play. Another reason I really like Jak and Daxter as a franchise is the world. Like I said, even though 1 is very different than 2 and 3, they kind of keep somewhat of a not I don't want to say consistent, but they have like this kind of mysterious and like islander type feel to them, even though in 2 and 3 you're not really in that I guess aura, or not aura, but place anymore. But they they all have like such a unique way of like having this world that Naughty Dog like built for you, and it's just so fun to explore. There's things that I can't really even think of like any other comparisons in any other games that I could compare it to. Like the whole precursor thing, for me has always been like super like mystical, mysterious, and like really cool. And I there's not many things like that anymore. And the whole thing with Jack 2 and 3, with the I forget the name of the major faction, but basically the people who own the city in Jack 2 and stuff, compared to like you would kind of almost go into like these little like temples or like caves and shit that kind of like bring it back to like maybe Jack 1, where it's almost like the inverse of Jack 1 now that I think about it. So cuz in Jack 2 it's very GTA like, right? In that you're in this like big city, and it's like free play, like action game and everything. But there are times where you go to these like caves or like temples or things, and you see these aspects of like older civilizations and lost technology and stuff, right? Whereas in Jack 1 you're playing on a more like lower tech, if there is any tech, it's more magic oriented, like island and everything. But occasionally you'll go into these like areas that you see like almost the opposite of like the whole precursor thing, in that it is an ancient and lost civilization, and things you see like that, but they have like technology that people, that you're, I guess the people in that game don't have, or don't really mess around with. So now I think about it, there's a cool like kind of opposite effect between those. But the Naughty Dog does a really good job of like, making the world really unique, and really really fun and cool. Another reason I really like that franchise is like just the gameplay. One was more of a traditional 3D platformer, and it had a lot of really cool and innovative ideas that made it feel like its own thing compared to what other 3D platformers were doing during that time. But there is a really big jump in the change of direction from 1 to 2 and 3. And you would think something like that would like be such a difference maker, or like maybe something that could go really badly, which it could have. But Naughty Dog kind of like pulls it off like really well. Like we go from this light-hearted 3D platformer collectathon to a more edgy, grounded GTA action game where you are stealing cars, running from the police, shooting things and stuff, and it just fucking works somehow. And the story gets way better in 2 and 3. The story's legitimately really 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 good, and the GTA gameplay is like, honestly, besides GTA, and I would even take, honestly I like it more than GTA the way that how it is. And it's just like it's so fun. They still kept a lot of the 3D platforming aspects, so you still have like a lot of like the punching, a lot of the platforming that you do from 1, but they added like guns into the mix. And then now you can, after a while you can learn like moves that like mixes like that platforming slash I guess fighting with the guns. Like I think of I forgot what the yellow gun is, but it's like a rifle in 2. And you eventually learn a move where you kind of do like a spin. Think of like a Crash Bandicoot spin, but you like shoot at the same time. So it's like does a lot of like AoEs and everything. It's really fucking cool. And like all the guns have like stuff like that make it interesting. The guns all are different from each other. You got like a more shotgun oriented thing. You have a more like the yellow rifle that's more like pointed and accurate, but has a slower fire rate. You have like almost like a minigun that's like blue, and then you have like the purple gun that I'm pretty sure it's kind of I forget exactly how that one is like, but I think it's more like I think more of like a needler type thing, but like heavier. Um, and it's really cool. And that's not even talking about the powers and like I guess yeah the superpowers that Jack gets in 2 and 3, because in 2 in the story he gets like dipped into like what's called dark eco, and he's kind of got like almost like a quote unquote like devil side to him that you can occasionally tap into, which is a lot of fun to play as. And then 3 they kind of do the opposite where he kind of gets a quote unquote angel side to him. And it's unironically called Light Jack and Dark Jack.
I could be your
But
angel or your devil.
yeah, exactly. But it's I mean they all the additions they do is really fun to play with. The racing, driving the cars and vehicles in that game, because the vehicles are all like kind of flying vehicles, and you can like go up and down. Like it just adds a lot to it. It all just meshes well in a way that it shouldn't work. But it does surprisingly well, and I feel like a lot of people have a lot of very fond memories and feelings of Jak and Daxter. And although while I do like what Naughty Dog's doing now, it feels like they kind of abandoned in a way like they're more lighthearted franchises.
Yeah, I was about to say
And
that. I feel like
yeah,
Nintendo nowadays has kind of the, I don't want to say monopoly, but they're really the only ones who are producing games that are like, for fun or for families, maybe is the way to put it.
yeah,
Something I think you'd be comfortable giving to like your 10, 12-year-old kid.
yeah.
And I mean, I know Fortnite exists, but that even then, that's still like tied in with all these other franchises. And but
Dude,
yeah,
I would
so
never give my kid Fortnite if I had one, bro. I'd be like, listen, you're sitting down here and you're gonna understand why Pikmin 4 is fucking incredible, all right? You're gonna learn how to play real fucking games.
yeah, but no, it's. I think it would be cool to have Naughty Dog go back to kind of those fun games, even if
Yeah,
they're
and
more
the
dramatic
funny
ones.
the funny thing is that Jak 2 and 3 kind of have like you can see them slowly transforming with that franchise actually, cuz like you have Crash, which is just like, funny stupid bullshit, right? Which
Hmm.
I love, right? And then Jak and Dexter kind of starts off a little bit like that, like lighthearted and everything, with a little bit of mystique and mysteriousness to it. It's not completely lighthearted, but there's nothing crazy where people are like, dying or, world ending, crazy stuff like that.
Yeah,
I guess maybe a little bit at the end, but and you slowly like start to see them like turn with the writing in 2 and 3, and adding a lot of like I said, the layers to the characters and to the world, where the jump to Uncharted is almost like, you saw it coming with Jak 2 and 3.
okay.
But
What if
not
they
to
made
the
a
extent of like something like Uncharted or Last of
Yeah,
Us.
what if they
But
made a Jak 4 and it's this like incredibly gritty reboot, rated M, just completely
I could kind of see
different?
it. I could
Yeah,
kind of see
I'd
it.
be fine
Yeah,
with it.
if they do it well, like it could work as long as they keep Daxter.
Hmm.
Like if they make him like fucking gritty and shit, like that I think would destroy, you know, the character. But I mean, like I
And for
said,
the
Jak
comedy's
is
sake, I think it'd just be funny to think.
decently
Yeah.
edgy, and he doesn't like throw a lot of like jokes out. Like he's there to get shit done. Things have affected him. He's kind of like a haunted person in a way, because like he's constantly just basically just being affected by things in there, like the dark eco and light eco and things that he doesn't want to, like, I guess, deal with and everything, but has to, right? So
I have all this darkness inside me.
yeah, yeah, those games are really good. Highly
Yeah,
recommend those games.
PlayStation games, so
The only
didn't
thing
have a lot of experience with them.
the only one I played out of the franchise was the PSP spin-off of Dexter, and I remember really liking that game.
Yeah, that game was
Like you
awesome.
were like exterminator or something, right?
Yeah, that game was really cool. Well, I think that wraps it up for us, right?
All right, Mike.
I do want to shout out some honorable mentions that we didn't talk about.
Killzone.
There's a couple I thought about that are tough. Killzone is one,
Resistance.
right? You brought that up. Resistance is another one. That's a good one.
That is a really
There was
good
one all three of us. There was one all three of us talked about that we were like, "Oh, you're gonna put it on your list, or are you gonna put it on your list?" Fucking Titanfall, bro.
Yeah.
Titanfall is a really good one. I hope that comes back so bad.
Yeah,
me too.
For me personally, there was three I was debating on putting on my list, and I eventually landed on Rock Band. But Sly Cooper is one. Dishonored's another one, and Gears of War. Even though I guess that one is a little bit more cheaty in a way because they're gonna do the prequel, or at least they announced the prequel, right? That is one that, I think the last game came out 2019 or something like that. Even it's like 6 years ago, but it feels like Gears is dead for some reason. And then another one for me, or the other two I had, were Wolfenstein. Man, and especially with the cliffhanger they left fucking Wolfenstein 2 in. And then Ruse, which is a World War II RTS game.
Yeah, we're just not gonna pretend that Youngblood exists.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what killed it. But you guys have any other honorable mentions you want to list off real quick?
I switched one out in the middle of recording here, and that is Castlevania.
I was gonna say Castlevania too.
Yeah. Honest to God, I know there have been a lot of games that have come out and just done it better. But I'm just thinking the TV show exists. It's had 4 seasons plus a spin-off that has 2 seasons so far, and they have not released a single bit of content that is their own game. They've just been doing like licensing to other games, which are again great, and again kind of do Castlevania a little better, especially like Dead Cells.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see these stories again, these characters. Maybe they could do the narrative a little more actively this time, knowing that there is a lot of interest for these characters. So instead of them just being vessels for the player with a little bit of story to kind of drive you to explore, full-fledged narratives a little more in line with, The Lord of Shadows, I think was the game that was like a third-person action RPG. I don't know if it was even an RPG, but kind of an action game like that.
It was like a hack and slash sort of, wasn't it?
Yeah, a little bit like God of War, I think, is a good comparison.
I was gonna say, do you want them to bring like a 2D adventure Metroid or Castlevania, or more of like a 3D? Because Castlevania kind of branched out to 2 different directions.
It did. I think I'd like it to be a 3D Vania, like Metroidvania.
A 3D Metroidvania, so like the Prime games.
Yeah.
Okay.
A good example.
Yeah, because I was gonna bring up Castlevania, because I was going to say like 2D Metroid, and then they brought back Dread. I forgot about that somehow, even though it's like one of my favorite games. And I was like, well, they haven't brought back like a 2D Castlevania in like forever, and I would actually like to see that. I think like Metroid Dread is like a perfect example to show that interest is still there. Especially like Hollow Knight is another perfect example of a game that still shows that like Castlevania in its 2D form is definitely something that people would want.
Yeah, there's a sequel series to Castlevania. It's not anyway related to the franchise, like narrative wise. I think it's called like Blood Moon or something.
There was another game that came out where you played as this like girl with blue hair. Was it like
Bloodlines? That's no, that's Castlevania Order of Ecclesia.
No, it's not a Castlevania game. I just remember that you can like summon flying pigs or something.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Yeah, there was this like Castlevania-esque game.
That's funny.
I'm sure I can find it real quick.
Yeah, it's just, there's just some pigs and stuff, man.
Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. That's the name of the game.
That's it.
Oh,
yeah, that's the one I was talking
about. Gotcha. I have that for some reason.
Okay, so honorable mentions. One is this one like racing game that is one of my favorite racing games of all time called Split Second. That game is fucking incredible. If you've ever played Burnout Paradise.
Burnout. Oh my god, Burnout's one for me. Burnout needs to come back.
I was gonna say, if you ever played Burnout, you would really like Split Second. That game was so fucking cool. And it's still like one of my favorite racing games to this day. The other one I was gonna say was Dead Space is pretty simple, but
Mm-hmm.
Contra. I don't know if you guys have ever played Contra, but they
I
rebooted the
mean,
series with like something core. I think it was called like Contra Hardcore, and it was
yeah.
garbage. But like OG Contra, they made this one called Contra 4 for the DS, and it was just better Contra. So like I would like to see Contra in like the 2D aspect, but like I don't know, maybe with some like new quips or something, because whatever they did with Contra afterwards was just like a travesty. I don't know what the fuck they were thinking. And then um, I would like to see a comeback to the Final Fantasy Tactics games because they haven't released one in fucking years at this point. And I feel like Nintendo has kind of oversaturated Fire Emblem to where they kind of haven't been releasing much anymore. I think the last one is still Three Houses, and personally, in my opinion, I didn't like Three Houses. Um, like Awakening was fucking incredible. Birthright and Conquest was really good, and then Three Houses was just kind of like, okay, I've had enough Fire Emblem. It's been like the fucking fourth one in the last 3
Didn't
years.
they come out with? No, they did come out with one like 2 years ago. It was the one where they brought back Marth.
Oh, I must have missed
And
it.
like the main protagonist has like red and blue hair.
Well, that just goes to show how
And you
little I
like
care about fucking Fire Emblem right now.
yeah.
But like, I feel like them bringing back Tactics would be huge. I mean, I know so many people got into Final Fantasy because of Tactics, myself included, and that
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of people still hold Tactics as one of the best Final Fantasy games they've played. And it plays a lot like Fire Emblem in a way, more 3D.
Mm-hmm.
So I think bringing back Tactics would only benefit them, especially because they kind of are doing nostalgia cash grab right now with like Rebirth and shit. So I don't see why they couldn't handle that. Okay, now I'm done.
Mike, where can people find us?
All right. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube with the handle uh at the Bonfire Nexus. You can also find us on any podcast platforms with the name The Bonfire Nexus. You can also email us at thebonfirenexus@gmail.com. I would love for people to comment or send emails about franchises that they want revived. Maybe that we didn't think of, like fucking Burnout. I probably actually might have had that in my list. I would have debated between that and Splinter Cell a lot.
Oh, they gotta bring back
Actually, now that I
Bioshock
think
too. That's
about it.
another game.
Yeah, Bioshock's another one that's good.
Yeah.
So, and then in general, any like general feedback, we're all kind of new to this, so I would definitely appreciate some feedback, and thank you for listening. So, see you later.
Ciao.
See you later.
Bye.